from you what you know about sampling. You would like to make this session interactive, otherwise sampling cannot be understood just by listening to a lecture, which many of the lectures are already available on YouTube, but we would like to just make it interactive so that learning can be maximized even in this virtual manner. So let us know from some of you what is sampling and why it is required. These are two questions on which I am just looking forward to your response. What is sampling and why it is required? First, let us start with what is sampling. If you don't know, just unmute and say you don't know, or whatever you know, you just share with me.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sampling is the procedure where you collect data from a population, basically.
Okay.
And the yeah.
What is the means why sampling is required? Means if we are collecting data from the population, from where sample comes into picture? Can't we collect data from the whole population?
No, if the population is too large,
okay,
then it will be difficult to measure each and every member of that population or each and every part of that population. So we take a sample that represents that population.
Okay. So very important point that you have pointed out is that represents the population. So to make your sample representative of the population, we use various sampling techniques, which we are going to study today. Okay, so let us share my screen. I hope I can do that. You have permitted me for doing so. Is it visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, friends, this is the picture of a sample which is given in front of you, how we just take the sample. You can see in this picture, this is a population. And from this population, we are just trying to find out the sample. And these are the three people who are the part of the sample. But from where and how we could reach to these three people is a question which we are going to just discuss upon and elaborate through various sampling techniques. We are having probably one session for the theoretical part of it, and one session will be devoted to exercise in which you have to practice. Okay, because without practicing, you won't be able to understand sampling. So let us continue further to the next slide. I don't know why. Yes. So as you have seen in the previous picture, sample is a subset of individuals from a larger population. The population is large and you want to find a subset of the population in the form of a sample so that your study is manageable. Otherwise, every time when the population is very large, as one of you have very rightly pointed out, it is not very easy to study the whole population. So sampling is selecting the group that you will, from where you will actually collect the data for your research. Okay, so maybe you are considering that the sample is representative of the whole population, but your actual data collection process, that will be only for the part of the sample only and not the whole. So when you plan a research study, we all know that we have a research question, we have a research objectives. You have studied all these things in the previous classes, I suppose.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So we will, when we'll be doing the practice, we'll be using your previous learning also along with practicing on sampling. So you test a hypothesis, and that hypothesis testing is basically leading to some of the generalizations which you are trying to make for the whole population from where the sample has been taken. So knowing the characteristics of your population is something which is very, very important. So as by now we are able to understand that samples are used to make inferences about population, means you collect data from a smaller subset of people taken from the population through some systematic technique, and whatever statistical generalizations you are able, statistical findings you are able to get from the sample, you make inferences for the whole population. Like if I am able to get that this particular sample is having positive perceptions about climate change and its impact and what are the different efforts which people can take. So I am believing that the whole population from which this sample has been drawn, they are also likely to have the similar kinds of perceptions. So in that manner, we are trying to make some inferences on the basis of our sample study for whole of the population. So when we are conducting research about a group of people, we all know that it's not possible to collect data from every person. So we go for sample selection, and they are actually participating in the study. And we are able to draw conclusions, as I already explained. And on the basis of conclusions, we are just trying to make generalizations. So what is most important when we are selecting a sample is that our sample should be representative of the whole group. How can we do so? Anyone having idea? Suppose we are conducting a study and we want to make our sample representative of the whole population. What efforts you can make in this regard? Suppose I want to ask a question from this batch of students, and I want to just ask this question from 3 students. So what method I'll adopt to choose those 3 students? Anyone would like to share their response? How I will select the 3 students who will be able to provide the response?
One is at random.
At random. Okay. How can I pick you randomly?
Alphabetical or just by name?
Okay. It won't be
Or
random. Alphabetical. Those
it
who
won't be
are
random,
in
yeah.
the beginning of the list are having better chances of being selected. Okay.
No, we can go like that, ma'am. The maybe for the first alphabetical letter, first 7 alphabetical letters, we will choose one. For the next 7, we will choose another. For the another 7, we will choose one another, like that.
Okay. 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 So you know which sampling technique you are talking about. This is a specific sampling technique. Very good answer you have given. So what this sampling technique is known as, what you have just spoken?
Don't know, ma'am.
Okay, I'll explain that, but definitely you all know what you're supposed to do. The only thing is that I'll be just sharing with you which sampling technique it is. Yes, somebody else was also
Thank you.
going.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, it is a random selection, and where we actually want to know which type of question you are asking. Depend on the type, means if it is related to career, then we will fill the background of the questions, and if it related to certain age group, we will select the person, like that, like males and females.
Okay, so you are talking about another very important sampling technique, rather the criteria of selecting the sample, that objective of your research is something which is very,
Yes, ma'am.
very
Objective.
important. So if you don't have any clarity about the objective of your research, then no matter whatever efforts you are making, you will not be able to select the appropriate and representative sample. So for
Yes, ma'am.
selecting a representative sample, you must have clarity regarding objective of your research. Anyone
ma'am.
else?
So, ma'am, one question that comes in my
Yes.
mind. So,
Yes, please.
that means there is nothing like random. I mean, when you
There is something like random. We will talk about it.
okay, okay,
Okay.
because I was just thinking that whenever we are going to, select samples, maybe I have something in my mind. Maybe I'll choose a senior citizen, maybe I choose a female, maybe I go for a young population and young. So, I mean, that way I was thinking. So random means I only know the random in the computer. I can do a random formula in Excel. Otherwise,
Okay.
whenever I'm going to choose some sample, that some thought will come in my mind.
Definitely, definitely, you are very right. And but there is a procedure of selecting the random sample, and when random sampling is required, and when you can just go with other techniques, that will depend on the objectives of your study, without which you may not be able to take that decision. Okay, but one thing is very clear, that when we are taking sample study, it is easier to collect data, it is more practical, it is more cost effective, it's convenient, it's manageable. Because suppose you decide to conduct a study, as this course is being run from Bhopal, so you want to conduct a study in the city of Bhopal, so you cannot just take data from each and every person who is the citizen of, who is the resident of the city of Bhopal. So you have to go for some technique. So which technique you will go for, that will depend on what is the study that you are going to undertake. So in the next part of this session, you are going to plan a particular study, for which you will be just deciding your own research problem, and then you will just work out what kind of sampling technique you can use and what can be various options to that. Okay. So population is, there are various terminologies in the sampling session. One is population. Population is the entire group that you want to draw conclusions about. Like you can see, this is a population, the entire group, like what I was going to talk about. The city of Bhopal, all the residents in the city of Bhopal are basically the population for the study in the city of Bhopal. So this is the population. And sample is a specific that you are going to collect data. So from this population, you are going to come to this particular sample. Okay, so how to reach from population to sample? In between comes a very important terminology, and that is sampling frame. Anyone having some idea about what is sampling frame? You can even read and try to explain, at least that will actively engage you with this particular terminology. What can be the sampling frame?
It will be a kind of criteria that we have set. Suppose we have set a criteria of 50 to 60 years. So that will
Okay.
be our frame.
If it's okay, you have selected the criteria 50 to 60 years, but sampling frame is basically a kind of actual list of individuals. Okay, so and from where you can just draw the sample. So if you are going for a sample study, you need a sampling frame. Like I have already given the example of a study. You want to conduct the impact of vehicular population on the health of vehicular pollution on the health of adults in your city. So suppose this is your example. Okay, so the research study that you are going to do. So what is your population? What is your population?
Above 60 age group.
Above 60? No, I'm asking about this particular example that I have given over here. It's already given.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's already given. Your population is all residents of a city under study. Okay, but not all residents, adults. It's written adults. Okay, so you need a list of all the adults in this city. Okay, and that will be your sampling frame. From where you will get that list? It's already written. Just read and connect. I just want to check whether you are reading it or not.
Voter list.
Yes, voter list. All the adults of a city are expected to be in the voter list. Their names are supposed to be in the voter list of that particular city in different constituencies which are there. Okay, so and in voter list, generally the contact details of residents are also there, because these days voter list is being updated online and the system is quite e-governance based. So you have all the contact details of all the adult members who are there in the voter list. So what is your sampling frame? What is your sampling frame in this case?
All the adults who are included in the voter.
No, your sampling frame is voter list.
Okay.
Okay. Your sampling frame is voter list. All the adults are basically your population. Okay. You see, go to previous slide. Okay. And this is the population. So this is, suppose for example, this is the city of Bhopal. Okay. So this is the population of the city of Bhopal. But you are concerned only about the adult population. So from where you will find adult population? Adult population you can find from the voter list. So voter list is your sampling frame, which will take you to the sample that you want to select. Okay. So sampling frame is basically instrumental to help you extract sample from the population. Okay, this is what sampling frame is all about.
That means, ma'am, it is basically the source from where we will get the data.
Yes, the source. Because if you don't have a source, how you will do sampling? Okay, you cannot just run on the road and catch hold of people, whomsoever you are able to find and calculate your sample size. You can't do like that. You must have some list from where you are just trying to use some sampling methodology, a sampling technique to find out the sample. So sampling frame is the actual list of individuals that the sample will be drawn from. So that should be some actual established list. Like take the other example, like you are who was responding right now? Your name?
Ma'am, Kundan Chaudhary.
Yes, Kundan, have you worked in some organization earlier or you are a fresher?
Ma'am, I am working presently in NTPC.
Okay, you are working in NTPC. So NTPC is an organization. Fine. So, suppose I want to conduct a study in NTPC. And my study topic is that I want to know NTPC is doing, you must be knowing that corporate social responsibility, CSR, is these days very popular, and all public sectors, they have to spend 2% of the profit before tax on CSR activities. If you are in NTPC, you must be knowing about it. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So I want to study the CSR perceptions. Means what are the perceptions of employees of NTPC about the CSR activities which NTPC is doing. So this is what I want to do. So what is my population?
NTPC employees.
All employees of NTPC is my population. Okay.
Correct.
But I want to do the sample study. Okay. So what information you need to go for sample study? Who are the people in NTPC who are directly or indirectly connected with CSR, who know something about CSR? Okay.
Correct.
Otherwise, there might be people of different levels in NTPC, starting from the people who are at the very ground level, blue collar and white collar workers, in all the organizations. So not necessarily that everyone is aware of the CSR activities which NTPC is doing. So let us decide, we are trying to get this information from officer grades people only. Okay, so now your population is not the all employees of NTPC, but the officer grades employees in NTPC. Okay, now what will be your sampling frame?
The employee list.
Not employee list, officers list.
Officers list. Yeah.
Yes, officer, because whatever is your relevant population, you will be drawing sample frame from that only. So the list of officers working in NTPC. Now there is another issue. NTPC is having multiple plants across the country. So which plant you are just trying to take sample from? So if you are trying to focus your study on just one plant, so you can just take the officer list of that plant. Otherwise, you have to go for other sampling techniques. Suppose you want to cover the perceptions of all the officers in different NTPC organizations across the country. So if that is your perspective, want to generalize whatever perceptions you are able to get from a particular sample, you want to generalize on all the states, all the places where NTPC plants are existing. So you want your findings to be generalizable to whole of the population. So in that case, you require to draw a sample from different NTPC units. Okay, so in that manner, sampling frame is the actual list of individuals from which you are going to draw the sample. So there can be two options. One option, if it's a one organization study, only the officers list of one of the NTPC plant, or if it is a overall NTPC as an institution study, then officer list of all the NTPC organizations separately placed. Okay, not mixing up of all the officers list, because we have to then go for a differential sampling technique I'm going to talk about, and I'll use the same example so that all of you are able to understand that. Okay.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am, one
Yes.
doubt I'm getting. See, suppose the whole list of NTPC employees is not my population. My population will be the list of officers, and that is
Yes.
also my sampling frame. Then is there, yeah, and
I
is
could
there
get
any?
you. I could get you. Ideally, sampling frame and population should be the same, but
Okay.
many times it doesn't happen. Okay.
Okay.
So that is why we use sampling frame to reach from population to our sample. Okay. But if you have the actual list of the complete NTPC plant officers, and that is your population and that is your sampling frame, both can definitely be same. Absolutely no problem in that.
Ma'am, then what about the whole list? Is there any name for that also? If, suppose, because first I got the whole list, then I filtered the only officers, then I got my samples. Is there any name for the whole list of the
Whole
NTPC
list is
employees?
your population, and what you have shortlisted for the officers list, that is your sampling frame.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine. Thank you.
Okay. So this is what we were talking about. This is a population, and from this is suppose NTPC, and this is the officers list, and this is the sample. So this is how we derive from population to sampling frame to sample. Is it clear to all of you? किसी को भी कुछ क्लैरिटी चाहिए हो हिंदी में, इंग्लिश में, इसके अलावा और कोई लैंग्वेज मुझे नहीं आती है तो आप पूछ सकते हैं, ठीक है? और इस पॉपुलेशन में जो आप देख रहे हैं ना, डिफरेंट पर्सन्स दिख रहे हैं, दे आर एलिमेंट्स और यूनिट्स. सो दीज आर डिफरेंट यूनिट्स and these are also different units. So we are basically, through sampling, we are trying to reduce the number of units from population to sampling frame to sample, so that our sample becomes manageable and we can conduct the study. ठीक है? Okay. So अब हम आते हैं डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ सैम्पलिंग पर. कितनी तरह की सैम्पलिंग होती है, हम कैसे कर सकते हैं, एंड उससे ही फर्दर हम लोग जो है वो आपका एग्जांपल उसी को कंटिन्यू करते हुए आगे बात करेंगे. सो फ्रेंड्स, ब्रॉडली वी डिवाइड सैम्पलिंग टेक्निक्स इन टू कैटेगरीज. वन इज प्रोबेबिलिटी सैम्पलिंग and another is non-probability sampling. Probability sampling जब हम यूज करते हैं, so that involves random selection. हमारा मेन पर्पस probability sampling को यूज करने में ये होता है कि आपके पॉपुलेशन में जितने भी यूनिट्स हैं उनको सेलेक्ट होने की पॉसिबिलिटी इक्वल होनी चाहिए. द प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ सेलेक्टिंग ईच यूनिट शुड बी सेम. So allowing you to make strong statistical inferences about the whole group. So probability sampling अगर आप यूज करते हैं तो उससे ये एडवांटेज रहता है कि हमने अगर सैंपल पर कुछ स्टडी की है तो उसके बेसिस पर हम स्टैटिस्टिकल इन्फरेंसेस या जनरलाइजेशन पूरी पॉपुलेशन के लिए निकाल सकते हैं. लाइक आपने एनटीपीसी के ऑफिसर्स की आपने स्टडी की और उसके बेसिस पर सीएसआर परसेप्शंस की, और उसके बेसिस पर आप कह सकते हैं कि सपोज आपके 1000 ऑफिसर्स हैं और आपने खाली 100 ऑफिसर्स की ही स्टडी की, लेकिन आप स्टैटिस्टिक्स लगाकर जब स्टैटिस्टिकल एनालिसिस उसका करेंगे, अपनी हाइपोथेसिस टेस्ट करेंगे, तो उसके बेसिस पर यू कैन से दैट योर फाइंडिंग्स आर एप्लीकेबल टू ऑल द ऑफिसर्स ऑफ एनटीपीसी, नॉट जस्ट फॉर द सैंपल ऑन whom you have conducted your study. So this is the advantage of probability sampling. Non-probability sampling, it involves basically the non-random selection. Means random selection is the basic criteria of probability sampling, and non-probability में हम random sample selection की तरफ नहीं जाते हैं. We are selecting our sample based on convenience, based on other criteria. हम लोग अभी further detail में different probability sampling techniques और different non-probability sampling techniques के बारे में बात करेंगे. Okay. So this is the whole framework of different sampling techniques which we are going to study today. Okay, although it's a Herculean task to complete in 1.5 hours all the sampling techniques, but I'll be able to give you the overview of all of them. Although we can't practice each one of them, but at least as per your choice of research topic, 1 or 2 sampling techniques you can definitely try out. Okay, so I'm just trying to complete my content by 11:15, so that roughly 40 minutes time we are having for the practice session. Okay, so this is a set of probability sampling techniques which start with simple random sampling. Any question? Friends, you can stop me at any point of time for questions. Okay, कोई भी query आपके mind में आती है बिल्कुल रुकिए नहीं. क्योंकि होता क्या है कि फिर मैं जिस टॉपिक पर बता रही हूँ आपकी उसी से रिलेटेड क्वेरी है, आप फिर बाद में पूछेंगे, फिर मुझे उस स्लाइड पर वापस आना पड़ेगा और उतनी देर आप आगे का पार्ट समझ नहीं पाएंगे क्योंकि आपके दिमाग में वो क्वेश्चन घूम रहा होगा कि ये तो हमें समझ में ही नहीं आया, है ना. So for the benefit of me as well as all of you, just stop me at any point of time whenever you require any clarification. तो ये है simple random sampling, then stratified random sampling, systematic sampling and cluster sampling. तो 4 techniques जो हैं they come under the category of probability sampling methods. और दूसरी classification इसका है non probability sampling techniques. किसी का mic on है कुछ that is creating disturbance, so आपको जब बोलना हो तभी आप unmute करिए and बाकी time आप जो है ना mute पर रखिए जिससे कुछ disturbance नहीं हो. So non-probability sampling techniques में भी 4 techniques आती हैं. मैं important techniques ही आपको बता रही हूँ. One is convenience sampling, another is judgmental or purposive sampling, third is snowball sampling, and fourth is quota sampling. So in this way, there are 8 sampling techniques, 4 in probability sampling methods and 4 in non-probability sampling methods. Now, any question on this model? Anyone knows any other sampling technique than what I'm showing over here? Okay, if no, I'm proceeding further. Any one of you, whenever I am posing some question, just respond yes or no or whatever may be, because in virtual system, I'm not able to see any of you. So I can't just assess your body language to know whether you are able to understand or not. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so just respond yes or no, or you are okay with that. It's clear, no question. Okay, just one or 2 word answers, please give.
Noted, ma'am.
Okay, so friends, now we are on probability sampling methods. And that's what I already explained. Every member of the population has equal chance of being selected. So if we are using probability sampling technique and we are conducting a study on NTPC or EPCO or any of the organization, we should have a sampling frame in such a manner so that every member of our population is having equal chance of being selected. So generally we use probability sampling methods for quantitative research when we want to apply some statistical techniques to test our hypothesis and give some conclusions on the basis of that, then we go for probability sampling techniques. And if we want to produce results that are representative of the whole population, like on the basis of the study on officers of NTPC in our sample, we want to extrapolate our findings to all the officers of NTPC in different locations wherever they are. So in that manner, we are just trying to extrapolate the generalization of our findings. So if we need that, if our research question is such that this information is very, very important, then we will choose for probability sampling techniques. Otherwise, it is not required. Not always we should go for random selection, as one of the question came up in the beginning, that randomization is never possible. So it depends on your research question, whether randomization is possible or not, and whether randomization is required or not. Both things are equally. Now let us see, these are the 4 types of probability sampling. Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Are you able to understand how we can derive on the sample?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, explain in the simple random sample what we have done. Suppose I'll give you the same example as I gave you. I want to pick any 4 students from this batch for responding to a questionnaire on what is your satisfaction level about this particular course or this particular session that I am taking. I just want to pick up 4 students. I don't want those who are very good in answering to my queries or any other criteria. I just want 4 students. And I want to take simple random sample for that, because that will be just most applicable in this particular case, because I want to have an overall picture of your satisfaction level with this particular session. So how I will pick that sample?
Ma'am, in simple random sample, you basically will pick any random person regardless of what group they belong to, what age they belong to, or what gender they belong to. It doesn't matter.
Okay, good. Okay, and suppose I want to take stratified sample from the same group of you all students. I'm not concerned that anyone should respond. I just want that I have a certain set of criteria on the basis of which I need that students should respond to my questionnaire or the feedback about this particular class. And I want to go for stratified sample.
Then ma'am, you will divide the group on basis of certain criteria, like maybe age or maybe gender or maybe whatever you have decided, and basis on that you will select one person randomly from that group.
Perfectly fine. Suppose I want to know the satisfaction level of students who are having some work experience and who are not having some work experience. This is one of my criteria. Another criteria of mine might be gender. Okay, another maybe you are from the diverse geographical locations. Okay, so I want to know the perception of people from different geographical locations. Okay, so we decide for stratas. One strata may be gender, another strata may be the states or the regions, east, west, north, south, and central region of the country. Another may be the work experience versus no work experience. So there can be n number of criteria on the basis of which we can decide our stratum. Okay, so then from each stratum, we are picking a random sample. So in this manner, stratified sampling actually operates. Then third is a systematic sample. So how you will explain systematic sample in the same research problem?
Ma'am, in this, I believe that we choose certain technique to select randomly from the population or group.
That is simple random, na?
But we have certain technique, certain way to choose
बताइए
this.
ना वो क्या technique होगी, क्या way होगा?
Like
Suppose I can see the list of participants. Let us be in this class. I can see 38 participants, and there is an alphabetic list of 38 participants which is visible to me. And I want to draw a systematic sample of 8 students from those 37. Now they have become from 38 to 37.
Maybe, ma'am, we will take at an interval of 7 students. That means one first number, 8th number, 15th number, and the next 23. This will be a systematic.
this will be a systematic, but how you will select that first number? That means the person who is on number 1 in the list is having the complete chance of being selected.
The first one will be the random, and the
Then
next
how
will
we
be
will go for first one as random?
just random.
लेते हैं फिर चलते हैं.
Not sure, ma'am.
Please mute yourself. It's disturbing the class. Any one of you who is unmute. Okay, see what we do in that particular case. Suppose we are taking a sample, we are taking every, like in this particular case, you see 1, then leaving 2, then 1, then leaving 2, then 1, then leaving 2, then 1. This is a systematic sample which is going on. Okay, but we are not just starting from 1, we are starting from 2. Okay, so then we are randomly deciding whether we are taking sample number 1 or 2 by picking a chit of 2 numbers. Okay, so like that, if we are taking a systematic sample of every 6 students, so we will be putting the chits of from 1 to 6, or in computer generated random numbers from 1 to 6, and we will randomly pick any one of the number. Okay, so suppose I am putting the chit and number 4 is coming, which I am picking from the chit. Okay, so I'll start picking my sample from number 4 from the list. Then 4, then after 6, the 7th one, 10th, then after 6, the 7th one, 17th. Like that, I will continue picking the sample. So this is what systematic sample is all about. Clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Then there is a cluster. What is cluster sampling? Just see what is visible to you and try to make some interpretation out of it.
It may be, ma'am, based on 2-3 criteria together. That means in my one cluster, there will be one female and one male, one working, one non-working. So that will form a cluster.
Okay, and from each cluster, you are basically choosing a cluster. That it is a multi-stage sampling basically. You are first choosing a cluster, and from that cluster you are picking a random sample. I'll explain. It's a little complicated to the other 3. I'll explain in the subsequent sessions. Like we are starting with simple random sampling. I'll explain all of them in the systematic manner so that you have all the clarity. Like every member of the population has equal chance of being selected, and your sample frame should include the whole population in this particular case. So for this sampling, you can use tools like random number generators. There are various, in computer you'll find random number generators. And if you are putting your sample frame into that and you want to pick, you have put in 1000 numbers, and in the sequence in which they are in the sampling frame. So random number generator can bring out whatever number you are looking for. Out of 1000, if you want 100 sample to be bring out, so through random number generator you can do that, so that all the members are equal chance of being selected. Like this example, you want to select a simple random of 100 citizens of your city, and you assign a number to all the citizens from 1 into whatever the number is as per the voter list which is already there with you, and you are using random number generator to select 100 numbers. Okay, so in this manner, simple random sampling takes place. In the earlier times, or particularly when the sample size is, when the population or the sampling frame is small, like your class, there are 38 students or 35 students, whatever are present over here. So even if you are not using the computer-based system, you can just put the chit of number of students, and whatever sample size you have decided, you will just pick that much number. So in that manner, you can do that. But if the population is large, if the sampling frame is huge, in that case, there is a requirement for random number generator to bring the required sample. Next is systematic sampling, which you have very rightly pointed out. When you choose every nth, means n means whatever number, it may be first, it may be fourth, it may be fifth. Not for first won't be there. If you are taking first, that means you are taking every member of the population, maybe every second, every third, every fifth, every seventh, whatever may be. So you are just moving like this. So for example, you can choose every fifth person to be in the sample. So in that case, out of 1 to 5, you will be picking the random number, And suppose in this particular case, random number came to be 3. Okay, so your picking is starting from 3. Then 3 came over here, then 4 and 5 are left out, then 6 coming over here, then 7 and 8 are left out, then 9th coming over here. So like that, it will continue till your sampling frame is completely exhausted. You cannot just say that, okay, up to 500, I am just doing systematic sampling. Okay, let rest of the people be left. No, if your sampling frame is large, no need to take every 3rd or every 5th. You may take every 10th, you may take every 15th, you may take every 20th, but it is very much required that you have to exhaust the complete sampling frame, so that each and every member of the sampling frame is having equal chance of being included in the sample. Any question?
No, I'm clear.
Okay. So like another example, all citizens of your city are listed in alphabetic order. From the first to 10 numbers, you randomly select a starting point, like you selected number 6. And from number 6 onward, every 10th person on the list you are selecting, like 6, 16, 26, 36, like that. And till the whole sample of 100 citizens is achieved, you are just continuing with this process, exhausting your whole sample frame. Okay. So I hope sampling frame is now clear to all of you, and I'm now proceeding to stratified sampling. We have 15 more minutes before we start practicing. So stratified sample, it involves dividing the population into subpopulations that may differ in important ways. Okay, so that the conclusions that you are drawing, that are representative of all the subgroups of the population also, not just one group. Like if you want to collect data from NTPC, the same example, if I continue over here. So, but this time you are not just concerned of officers, or you are concerned about officers only, but from officers only, you want that officers of all levels of seniority should be there as part of the sample, so that your sample is a little more representative. So what you will do in that case? What you will do in that case? How you will decide strata? Based on years of experience or based on your designations. Like there are 4 designations within officer cadre. So you are having the separate list of all the 4 designations within your officer cadre. Okay, so then these are your 4 stratum or your subgroups. There is homogeneity within the subgroups, that all officers of a particular designation, or all officers who are males, all officers who are females, all officers who are within 1 to 4 years of experience, all officers who are within 5 to 10 years of experience, all officers who are within 11 to 15 years of experience. So like that, you can create stratum, or you can create income brackets, or the job role or designation, whatever you may take. So in that manner, you are creating subgroups, and you are using simple random sampling technique to take sample from each of the stratum, so that none of the category is lost. None of the stratum is lost from being included in the sample, and your sample is a little more representative. Okay, so in that manner, some officers, as per the decided number from designation X, some from designation Y, some from designation Z. So in that manner, you can proceed. So there are different ways through which, different steps rather, through which stratified random sampling is conducted. Like first you have to define the target. What is your target population? Then you have to recognize the stratification variable. Like in this case, we decided years of experience, or we have decided gender, or we have decided designation. So that is your stratification variable. Then on the basis of that, you have to create a sample, means the list of sample frame, particularly the list of officers in each of the designations. Then you are evaluating that list, that okay, all the members are basically included and none of them is lost in this particular case. Then define elements per stratum. Within each stratum, designation may be within the designation also, there may be males and females. So we will be subdividing our stratum also, the elements of the stratum also, we are deciding that within each stratum, what are the different elements. Then we are assigning a number to each element in the sampling frame, whatever we are having, and the size of the each stratum. Okay, so maybe the size of the officers in senior category, if it is an old organization and not much new recruitments have taken place. So your size of your sampling frame in the lower levels of designations with officer category will be lesser, and in higher categories will be more. So keeping the same proportion in mind, you will be selecting the random sample, but what number you are going to take from each of the stratum, the size of the each stratum, that will vary depending upon the actual existence of number in respective stratums. So from higher designation, we'll be taking more number of officers in the sample. From lower designations, we'll be taking less number of officers in the sample, because in higher designation stratum, the number is more. In lower designation stratum, the number is less. So in this manner, we just follow different steps in conducting stratified random sampling. Like the example is in front of you, a company is having 800 full-time and 200 part-time employees. Okay, so one stratum is full-time employees and another stratum is part-time employees. But in full-time, there are 800 and in part-time, there are 200. So it's a very simple example, that is that you have to draw a sample of 100 employees. So a simple random sample of 80 full-time employees, 10% of this 800, and 20 part-time employees, 10% of this 200 will be your stratified random sampling, because there are only two strata which are available. And how you will take 80 and 20? That will be through simple random sampling technique. You are having the list of employees through random number generator. You are just picking 80 out of that, and same process to be followed for the next category. Stratified random sampling is clear to all of you. If anyone is having some doubt, some clarification needed, you can just ask right now.
Ma'am, there is a question.
Yes, please.
In this example, if I see you told that for the 80 full-time employees, we are taking 10% of the 800 and again 20 for 10% of 200. So I was just thinking that it may be like that the full employee is 1000 and we have a ratio of 80-20, 80% full employee, 20% the part-time. In a similar way, if my sample is 100, I should consider 80 and 20% of the ratio. If suppose my sample is 50, in that case, I will have 40 from the full-time and 10 from the part-time. So
of course, no. Same proportion you have to take.
Same proportion, yeah. Thank you.
Next, we are coming to cluster sampling. So this is a way to randomly select participants when they are geographically spread out, like a particular organization's plants, NTPC or any other institute, or suppose we are conducting a study on IITs, and IITs are located at different places in the country. So our sample is geographically spread out. So cluster sampling that usually analyzes a particular population in which the sample consists of more than few elements, like the city, family, university. So there are different clusters in different places. So what you do, you basically, you first, you cannot, suppose there are 20 IITs and you cannot take all the IITs in the study. And the first step that is there is you have to just pick up the cluster. Okay, so you may be using the simple random sampling technique. First, you will identify the clusters, and on the basis of those clusters, you will be using simple random sampling technique to find some of the clusters. Like you are believing that there are some old IITs and there are some new IITs and there are some mid-time IITs. Okay, some very new, some very old, and some which has been created in the middle of the time. So these are your three clusters. Okay, so in that manner, you may decide that no, this example will not work. This is just one criteria which will better apply when we are going for stratified random sampling. We are just taking that we are presuming that there are 20 IITs and all 20 IITs are almost equal in their functioning. This is our hypothesis. Okay, because sampling will depend on your hypothesis. But we can't study 20 hypotheses. So let us divide those IITs into certain clusters. Like IITs located in eastern area, IITs located in western areas, IITs located in northern areas, southern areas, central areas. Okay, so we may presume that those in a particular cluster are basically the same.
Ma'am, we will have certain criteria for cluster 2.
Yes, we will have certain criteria. Please, someone is disturbing the class. Please mute yourself. Like another example, you say companies having offices in 10 cities across the country, all with roughly the same number of employees and same roles. Okay, so this example will better explain cluster sampling. And you don't have the capacity to travel the office to collect the data, so you will use random sampling to select only 3 offices, and these are your clusters. Okay, so in this manner, similarly in the IIT case also, you are not selecting 20 IITs, you are just selecting 5 of the IITs out of 20 or 3 of the IITs out of 20, and then 3 IITs are your clusters. And from those 3 IITs, the further level of selection is basically your subgroups. You are randomly selecting subgroups out of it. Like I'll just explain the comparative analysis of stratified and cluster sampling. Like population divided into few subgroups. Here population is divided into many subgroups. Subgroups are many, like there are 10 the company's offices are in 10 cities, or IITs are in 20 locations. So your population is divided into many subgroups. In stratified, in few subgroups, like just designations or gender or work experience or not having work experience, like that. Then each subgroup is having many elements in it, like gender. Females of all the employees of NTPC. So lot of elements are there, or males of all the elements, or people in the manager designation. So many managers in all the organization. Here each subgroup is having few elements in it. So number of subgroups are more, but within each subgroups the elements are less. Like one of the element is IIT or one office in one city. Okay, so here in stratified, subgroups are selected according to some criterion, and that is related to variable understudy. And subgroup are selected according to some criteria of ease or availability in data collection. This is very important, that because there are so many IITs or so many offices of a particular organization, and it is not very convenient to reach out to all of them or their availability for collecting data, we are moving for cluster sampling. So we are just picking few of the subgroups. We are not even collecting data from all the subgroups. Like if you want to conduct a study in Madhya Pradesh, so in Madhya Pradesh, I have to go for cluster sampling, because whole of the Madhya Pradesh, how I will reach out to whole of the Madhya Pradesh? So I will go for cluster sampling. That means I'll just see the districts of Madhya Pradesh. Maybe there are 50 districts, 52 districts. So I am just picking 10 districts out of it, or 4 districts out of it, or 5 districts out of it, as per the time available to me for collecting data. So there is heterogeneity within subgroups, mean different subgroups. Within the subgroups, there is heterogeneity, but between subgroups, there is homogeneity. So in that manner, here, homogeneity within subgroups like gender, So all females, heterogeneity within subgroups. So within that subgroup, between those subgroups, there are different groups. Like one is male, one is female, like that. But gender, all same. So here heterogeneity within subgroups, but homogeneity between subgroups. And then you can randomly choose subgroups because you presume that all the subgroups are same or all the IITs are almost the same. So we can pick up any of the 5 IITs to conduct our study, or we can pick up any of the districts to conduct the study. But there might be a likelihood that this case may not apply. We cannot have this assumption whether your research allows that you can have in the assumption that all the districts in Madhya Pradesh are the same. If your hypothesis doesn't allow that, then you cannot go for cluster sampling. You have to go for stratified sampling, where you have to create a strata of the set of districts which are closely located. And from those stratas, you will be picking some of the districts. In that manner, you will move from cluster sampling to stratified sampling. So in this manner, this sampling procedure varies. Now, this is just a model which explains when to go for what. Like you have to consider the sampling. Can data be collected from the entire population? No. So if no, then must statistical inferences be made from the sample? You require some statistical inferences to be made from the sample? Yes. Then do your research require face-to-face contact? Yes. Then is population geographically concentrated? Yes. Then does sampling frame have relevant strata? Yes. Does sampling frame contain periodic patterns? No. Then you can go for stratified random sampling. Then here, does sampling frame have relevant strata? No, there are no relevant stratas. Then does sampling frame contain periodic patterns? Yes, periodic patterns are there. Then you have to go for simple random sampling, because with periodic patterns, you cannot just go for strata because many elements will be missed. But if periodic patterns are not there, then you can go for systematic sampling. Okay, because in systematic sampling, if you have periodic patterns, like if you are trying to understand the students, some study on students, and some of the students are more intelligent than others, some of the students are high scorers than others, and there is a periodic pattern. So then you have to go for systematic. You cannot go for systematic sample. You have to go for simple random sampling. So in this manner, this model I'll be sharing with you, this is taken from, it might be available on websites also, like that. For all the samplings, you have to just go for, like, if I take you to another example, like, does the research require face-to-face contact? No. Then does the sampling frame have relevant clusters or strata? Yes. Then if the clusters are there, you can go for cluster sampling. But if it is not there, relevant strata and clusters are not there, then does sampling frame contain periodic patterns? If periodic patterns are there, you can go for simple random sampling. If periodic patterns are not there, you can go for systematic sampling. So in this manner, this whole process of sampling goes on. Now, another category of sampling is non-probability sampling, where we are not going to have some generalizations about our sample. So they are based on non-random criteria, and not every person in the sample, in the population, is having equal chance of being included. So it is easier, cheaper to assess, like many of you were saying that it is not possible to every time do randomization. That is true. But there is a risk of sampling bias. Like, I'm selecting 3 of the respondents from this particular class. I can see 41 now, and I want to select 3. So I just choose those who are visible on my screen. Like, I can see Prabhat Jha, I can see Alok Kumar Gupta. So I'm just selecting them because they are easily visible on my screen. Okay. Or there can be another way, that I am just choosing those who are responding to my questions. Okay. Or I'm choosing those who are opening their videos, who are available on the video screen. So I'm asking question to those people. But there are sampling biases. There is a possibility that many others who are not switching on their videos, but they are listening more carefully and they are able to understand more carefully in comparison to others. So there might be a lot of sampling biases. So they are used when you are not going to make inferences about whole population. I can pick 2 such students who are very good responders in the class, but on the basis of their responses, can I make generalizations that the whole class is thinking like this, or it is the opinion of whole of the class?
Definitely not, ma'am.
Definitely not. So that is the difference between probability and non-probability sampling. And it depends what kind of research we are doing, that we have to go for probability sampling technique or we have to go for non-probability sampling techniques. And they are used when we are going for exploratory study, qualitative research, and any research in which we are not just specifically testing a hypothesis and we are trying to explore a new area and we are not having any clarity about whether our research results will be generalizable to the whole population or not, and we are doing some qualitative analysis of a sample of the population. So in that case we go for non-probability sampling technique. So this is a convenience sampling technique. Like whomsoever we are able to find, we just collect data. Like this person is standing and in a group, and these are the 5 people who are very closely located to this fellow, and he just asking information from them, and on the basis of that he's just coming to certain conclusions, but not necessary that these conclusions will be applicable to the other set of people. Then there is a snowball sampling technique, quota sampling, purposive sampling. So how all these operate, I'm just quickly giving you a glance of all of them. Like this is a convenience sampling. All of you might be knowing about the convenience sampling, that it is just selecting the haphazardly all those cases which are easiest to obtain. So particularly when we are going in the villages and we want to do some interaction with the communities. So what do? We just go and sit in a community hall and we just request the village leader or the panchayat sarpanch and some other people that please call some of the villagers. And those villagers who were living nearby are the first ones to reach over there. And we, without wasting our time, we just decided, okay, let us start asking information from them. And then we'll see when the others come. So these are the people who were conveniently available and we have collected sample from them and we pursued with our study. So this is what convenience sampling is all about. Then like you are researching opinions about student support services in your university. So after each class, you will ask your fellow students to complete a survey on the topic. So you are conveniently just surveying only those students who are in your class, and that doesn't mean that it is representative of whole of the university. Now, this is judgmental or purposive sampling, which is very commonly used in mixed method research, particularly when you are using qualitative as well as quantitative research all together. So this is having some of the features of qualitative probability and some of the features of non-probability sampling, but it is categorized in non-probability techniques only. So in this particular technique, sample members are chosen on the basis of researchers' own knowledge and judgment. Like it enables you to select cases which will best enable you to answer your research question. Like you go in a village, the same example that I was giving you. But you know that not all the people in the village will be able to equally respond to the questions that you are having. So you just tell the sarpanch that please call only those people who are literate at least till level 10, till grade 10. Okay, so that they are better able to respond to that. And try to find out that some of those are females also. So your first criteria is 10th pass. Another criteria is representation of both males and females. So you have a set of people who are actually meeting your criteria of study, 10th pass, males and females. So in this manner, judgmental sampling technique takes place. Like you want to know about the opinions and experiences of the disabled students at your university. So you purposefully select a number of students with different support needs. in order to gather a wide variety of data on their experiences with support services. Like you have some visually disabled, some students who are having some writing disability, some students who are having some other kind of disability, walking disability, reading disability. So different types of disabilities are there. So you are just selecting students on the basis of their different types of abilities. So now from the same sample, you can go for stratified random sampling also, and you can go for judgmental sampling also. If you are going for stratified random sampling, then you have a set of students in each of the disability. And from that, each of the disability criteria, you are randomly picking up some of the students to provide information about university support services. But if you don't want to go for stratified random sample and you are just going with judgmental sampling only, so you could get the students as per the stratas of different types of disabilities. But from that strata, you are not picking students randomly. You are just taking whomsoever is coming first for giving data, or whomsoever is willing to provide data, you are just conveniently taking that. So stratas are identified, but within the strata, you are not just going for randomization. Then this is snowball sampling technique, which was very commonly used in lockdown days when a lot of Google form based research studies were conducted. This is a referral method. Like suppose this person started conducting a research. So he created a Google form and he circulated this form to two of his subordinate colleagues and told them that you further circulate it in the three of your further student supporters for that particular study, or student interns for that particular study. So 3 interns were working under this fellow and 3 interns were working under this fellow. So now the questionnaire from 1 to 2 and 2 to 6 has reached. And now these 3 students have been told that you circulate this questionnaire in your all social media handles to extract as much information as possible. So, and with the request to them to share it further as far as possible. So this is known as snowball sampling technique. Like one ball is thrown to 2 people, then these have thrown to 3 more people, then like that it is continued. So this is also known as chain referral sampling method. So like you're researching experiences of homelessness in your study, you don't have any list. This technique is only used when you don't have any sampling frame. Because in all the cases, you don't have the sampling frame readily available if you are not conducting your study in a particular organization. So when there is no sampling list, so you have to go for snowball sampling technique. And you collect data from all those who agree to provide information in your research. So willingness of the participants, willingness of the sampling units, and their willingness to participate in the study is something which is very, very important. And for that, snowball sampling technique is used. There is another sampling technique that is known as quota sampling technique. So this is selection of members on the basis of a particular quota, like males above 50. So what we are doing, the sample is formed on the basis of specific attributes. The created sample will have the same attributes that are found in the total population. So it is not like the stratified sampling where like the cluster sampling where we are believing that different clusters are having different traits. Okay, so this is a quick method that we are just quickly collecting some of the sampling frame on the basis of attributes. And then from those attributes, we are collecting data from, we are selecting sampling units in a non-random manner. So whenever we are going for non-random manners, then there are sampling errors. So sampling errors is when your sample is not representative of the whole population. So we should know that some or the other sampling error will always be there, even if we are going for probability sampling techniques. But there are certain acceptable limits of sampling errors and there are certain unacceptable limits of sampling errors. So how much sampling error you can accept, that will depend on your research problem. Okay, so how much you want to generalize your study, what is your research problem, that will decide that whether you are able to accept 5% sampling error or 10% sampling error or 3% sampling error, whatever the case may be. So generally the acceptable limits are 5% or 1%. So you must have heard about the confidence intervals, like there is a 95% confidence interval, there is a 99% confidence interval, which are commonly accepted. In certain exploratory and qualitative studies, we even go for 90% confidence interval. So what does these confidence intervals actually mean? Confidence interval actually means that the remaining part might be subjected to sampling error, but we are okay with that. So the margin of error is basically the amount of error that is allowed for miscalculation to represent the difference between sample and the actual population. There will definitely be a difference between the actual population and the sample. So that difference is basically reducing the accuracy of your results. But you are okay to accept the loss of accuracy by 5% or 10%. So these are some of the common sampling errors, like the population specification error, like researcher is not exactly able to know what he is going to survey. So that may cause population specification error. Like the person says that, oh, I am just going to study the whole city. So, and he's not having any clarity. Okay, city is having a large number of attributes, but what are those attributes which are most important for you? Whether it is age, or it is gender, or it is working people, or it is non-working people, or it's housewives, or it's working females. So if you are not having any specification about your population, you don't know precisely about that, then it may create problem. The example may be that the research study about impact of population of health, pollution on health, as I previously indicated. So who is the right person to survey? It can be both rural and urban, adult and children, males and females. And you may decide that since industry and vehicles are more in urban areas, so let us ignore the rural setups. So in that manner, you have failed to specify the population. So ideally what you should do, you should conduct the separate study for rural areas and urban areas. But you are altogether ignoring the rural areas, presuming that there won't be any pollution in the rural areas, in spite of the fact that firewood is one of the major source of pollution in rural areas also. This is just an example. We are not just going in the intricacies of the study. So that means that if population is not specified by the researcher, the sampling error might occur. And there is a sampling frame error. They arise when researchers target the subpopulation wrongly while selecting the sample. Like picking a sample frame from a telephone white pages book. You don't have any voter list accessibility. So you are just trying to go for the telephone white pages book. And you have the erroneous inclusions because people are shifting cities. So many of the numbers are wrongly placed over there. Or many people, they prefer to unlist their numbers from these days, these telephone yellow books don't exist at all. But just for the sake of explaining you people, that we don't want somebody should randomly call us and disturb us. So many rich people, they just important people, they just get their numbers unlisted. We don't want our number to be commonly available. Okay, and there might be some wealthy people who are having more than one connection. So in that manner, your sampling frame might be erroneous. Okay, so similarly in the voter list, there might be a lot of names. Okay, but many of the names in the voter list, the people have shifted to some other city, or they have gone out, they are doing job in some other place, they have gone abroad. So they are no longer existing in that particular city, but their name is there. So there are lots of errors in the sampling frame also. And somehow when you are doing randomization, that particular person is selected and that person is not available to provide the information. So in that manner, there can be a lot of sampling frame errors also, which will definitely account within the 5 to 10% of confidence interval that we are talking about. Similarly, there can be a selection error. Selection error is, it occurs when respondents self-select themselves. I want to participate in this study. And only people who are interested to participate out of their excitement for that particular study. So they are entering in the sample, and the randomization is completely lost. So you have to do some pre-survey planning and all, so that it's okay to increase the participation rate by taking the willing people, but that should not mean that they are making the sample not representative of the other attributes of a particular population. Then sampling errors also occur due to disparity in representativeness of the respondents. When researcher is not planning the sample carefully, and there can be any number of uncalled for errors which may happen by using, particularly they happen when you are using online survey, and you select a particular number of people to whom you want to connect with, but they are the people who are not responding to that. Response rate is very low, and as a result, ultimately you are ending up taking whomsoever is providing responses. So that kind of errors are bound to be there. So many of the errors you can reduce by increasing your sample size. Like if you need a sample of 100, so particularly for online samples, target for at least 300, so that if you have a 30% response rate, your minimum sample size is achieved. Then you may divide the population into subgroups, so that the likelihood of people feel important, that okay, this information is being collected only from the officer grades and DGM level. So those people feel important, that we are the only people who are providing information. And if it's some general survey, many times people don't take interest in that. Oh, we don't want to. So in that manner, if you are trying to specify the population, divide it into subgroups, the likelihood of response rate becomes higher. For that, you have to know your population. What are the different attributes of your population? On the basis of that only, you have to move for sampling. So these are some of the methods of good requisites for good sampling method, that it should be proportional, it should be randomly selected, economical, size should be not that much that your research fund is not able to meet that, it should be practical, and people who are providing information, they should be actual information providers and not the fake people who are just for the sake of being included in every study. They are just saying, oh, I would like to give information, but ultimately they don't have any depth for that. So with that, we are coming to the sample size. We generally say the larger and representative the sample, the lesser the error. So if you are taking a large sample size, many of the sampling errors are automatically diluted, and your accuracy of result will be high. So the size will depend on the accuracy you need. As I already told, that if you are taking 95% of the confidence interval, and you can only tolerate 5% error, so in that case you can just calculate your sample size in a different manner, because you have to take a larger sample size so that the error is automatically reducing. So your own judgment plus the calculation, that gives you a sample size. So if you're going for any statistical analysis, the minimum number is considered to be 30. So less than 30, you cannot conduct any kind of statistical analysis. However, further to that, your population, confidence interval, and then there are various online sample size calculators also which are available. There are some softwares also which are available. There's a formula for calculating sample size, but without going in the complication of that, you can just put your sample attributes in a sample size calculator and you can get a minimum size. That is just a minimum size, without not just that you cannot take more than that. So the minimum size you will be able to get, and anything more than that will be sufficient, but you cannot go less than that, so that your statistical results are generalizable, and you are able to maintain the normality assumption of the of your sample. I must be knowing about, if you have studied some basic statistics, that in any kind of study, most of the people are basically concentrated in the center, and limited number of people are at two extremes. And whenever we are doing any statistical analysis, we first test the normality assumption of the sample. And if normality assumption of the sample is being met, like the bell-shaped curve of normal probability, that is being met by the sample size that you have taken, then you can go for probability sampling. But if your data is skewed, like most of the people are in higher designations of officer category in comparison to the people who are in the lower designations of officer category, then your data is skewed. So, and when your data is skewed, then you cannot just go for normal probability sampling techniques. You have to go for non-probability sampling techniques. And there are different sets of statistical techniques which you can apply based on the sampling techniques that you have followed. Like for analysis of significance of difference between means, if you have used probability sampling, you can go for t-test. But if you have adopted non-probability sampling technique, you have to go for chi-square test. So in that manner, if you are using ANOVA, analysis of variance, for testing of significance of difference between multiple means, t is used for two sets of means. If you are having multiple means, then you will be using analysis of variance if your data is, if your sampling technique is probability. But if it is non-probability, then for the same set of data, you will go for Duncan's range test. So like that, statistical techniques for probability and non-probability samplings specifically vary. I'm sorry I couldn't have much time for practice, but definitely we can do something briefly. So any question before we proceed further? Is it clear to all of you, whatever I spoke for roughly 1 hour, 40 minutes, or even more than that? Is it clear? No response? Could I explain something to you? Could you learn what is sampling? What are different techniques of sampling?
No, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. Okay, so let us practice. So let us practice. Think about one research question, whatever is there in your mind, and note down in your notebook your research question. Please mute yourself. So after you have identified your research question, please don't take the research questions which I have already discussed in my examples. Okay, try to find some new research question which you would have wished to study sometime. So have that research question in your mind. Otherwise, learning, you won't be able to just practice. You will be just saying whatever I have already spoken. Okay. So identify your own research question. Identify then your target population on whom you will conduct your study. What will be the population and what is its approximate number? So that also you have to, it is just a practice exercise. You may not be having the exact numbers, but just imagine something. Then decide a confidence interval you need based on your research question, that you need 90% confidence interval or 95 or 99. 99 is the maximum. Because 1% error you cannot just forego when you are doing a sample study. Even with the population study also 1% error cannot be reduced. Then decide your sample size on the basis of that. May not be through calculation, you can just have a rough estimate of in percentage terms as of now. There are lots of YouTube videos also which you can see how to identify sample size, and a lot of sample size calculators are also there. So it is just for your basic understanding. Decide on your sample size. On the basis of that, plan what will be your appropriate sampling technique. This is just one example that I have given of your research question, and you can plan any of the research question, whatever you feel like. Like you are planning to study climate change perceptions of coastal/Himalayan youth population of India. So if this is a research question, what will be your target population? What will be your sampling frame target population? Along with that, just go for the sampling frame also. Then what will be the confidence interval that you need? Come on your sample size. plan an appropriate sampling technique and how you will implement that, how you will actually use your sampling technique to find the sample. The practice is clear to all of you, what you are supposed to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So spend some 5-7 minutes time to briefly outline. Just a brief outline is required over here. If you are able to do that, that is fine. If you have any question or query, or you are not able to do that, you can just unmute and ask me. I'm there till 11:55. I hope you are able to do that. There is no issue.
No, ma'am. No issue, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So I'll now randomly ask some of you when you are done with it after 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. 2 of you will be asked to randomly explain what you have done. So friends, I hope many of you have done it. So let us listen from you, whatever you have done. So I am reaching to Anushri. Are you there? Anushri or Apurva? And then Suraj Verma. Two of you will be just explaining what you have done.
Good morning, ma'am. Suraj.
Yes, Suraj, what you did in this practice session? What is your research question?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I took the topic. I just wanted to check the illumination level in our plant. So, basically, what is the lighting level? It is calculated in the lux unit. So, for that, we have to conduct a survey in around 300 sections.
Okay.
So, it will be my population. And that section will be same as a sampling frame also, because we have the list of mostly sections will be there, so it will be sampling frame also.
Perfectly
And
fine.
confidence interval I have taken 95%.
Good.
Then sampling size, as it will be difficult keeping in view the time period. If I want to conduct survey in one day, then it will be difficult to conduct a survey for all the 300 sections. So I have taken 30% as sampling size.
Okay.
90 areas, 90 sections, I will be conducting my survey. And then my technique which I will be using, I have chosen stratified, because there are different sections, like in open areas, roads, in front of general office, so that will be coming under open areas, which is directly under sky. So I have taken areas and sections where machineries are operating. Mostly these are the areas where workers are engaged during night hours. So I have taken equipment and 10 open areas, then rooms and offices. Like operators are working inside rooms and workshops, so 30 rooms and offices and 10 CCR. So 24/7 CCR operators are working inside operating control rooms. So likewise, I added my areas into these streams straight.
Okay.
And then I will be conducting, and finally some result I will be getting like 80 lux or 100 lux. Then average I will be taking in these areas. This much is there and standard is this. So I will be, means what steps to be taken to improve that illumination in this area.
Perfectly fine, Suraj. Now let us come to Anushri or Apurva, whomsoever is available.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Anushri.
Yes, yes, Anushri.
Ma'am, I'm not quite sure, but I chose the top research question that are individuals in Bangalore ready to switch to electronic or eco-friendly cars, because that is about to be launched in India.
Very good research question. Yes.
Okay. So as I chose people from Bangalore, specifically licensed individuals from in Bangalore, those who have license, and I chose to have 10,000 sample size, and I grouped people based on
just 1 minute. 10,000 sample size. In how many months or years you are just planning to complete your study? 10,000 is too large. Okay. So whatever the size of Bangalore city may be, there are some minimums and some maximums always applicable. Like the minimum is 30 I have given, though there is no specified maximum, but the time that you have for conducting this study is very important, and the feasibility is also very important. So I'll request you that the size should not be 10,000. The conducting the statistical analysis and managing that much data is physically very difficult. So you may take the sample of roughly 1,000 to the maximum, not more than that.
Okay. And I chose to select people based on income groups, like below 5 lakh, then 5 lakh to 10 lakh, their annual
See,
income.
below 5 lakh,
based
no
on their
one can
annual
afford
income.
electric car. Okay.
Yeah.
So you better take the sample with the income frame of above 8 lakh, not less than that. Okay. Because the affordability as of now is not there for people with the income level less than 8 lakhs. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So based on, so that I just wanted to base on income groups, because so that I can take a sample from all the economic backgrounds, right?
Perfect.
And then sampling technique would be
that is the most important thing, sampling technique. How you will reach out to those 1,000 people in the city of Bangalore. What will be your sampling frame?
Licensed individuals.
Okay. Licensed individual, you have the list. You can take the list from RTO, the list of licensed individuals. But more than that, because your target population is the income group above 8 lakhs, finding the income groups might be very difficult. Okay. So in that case, it is, you may even only take the licensed individuals for 4-wheelers. Okay. So that will reduce some of your sample in that particular case.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And for technique, I thought of stratified sampling, like 10% from each group, income group, so that we have an equalized opinions.
In this particular case, sampling frame is a very crucial thing. How to create a sampling frame out of which you can have 10% is huge. You cannot even take 1%. Okay. So looking at the size of the Bangalore and the size of people who are earning more than 8 lakhs per annum. Okay, so these are, I just wanted to explain that there are some of the practicalities which you have to take into consideration while planning a study, that how you will actually do it. Okay, so in this case, I'll request you that snowball sampling is something which is most appropriate. And you should just throw the survey to in your social media with the request to throw it further in their own social media networks, and like that you should get the information through Google form, and put the specific item as the income of those people or income categories in which they have to just tick. And on the basis of the data that you are getting, you can just exclude all the data which has been filled by people who are having annual income less than 8. So in that case, you should have at least 10 times of the data what is required, so that you can exclude all unnecessary data and reach at your conclusion that you only want people in this particular slabs of their annual incomes. Okay.
But ma'am, in that case, isn't it possible that the percentage of people who are maybe lying or maybe have not correctly filled the form would be more for snowball?
See that is the same thing applies to probability sampling also. If you have selected people randomly through stratas, then also the percentage of people giving wrong information might be the same. So you have no control over that. If somebody decides to provide wrong information, you can't control that. So that is to be considered in your sampling errors. So you will come to know about all these things when you see whether your data is in normal probability curve or not. Okay, so normality assumption is checked through statistical modes. So when you will check that assumption and your data is meeting the normality mode, then you have to believe that those who are fitting in that particular normality assumption, their data is coming within that range. So the likelihood of it being appropriate might be high. And for rest of the standard error, you can even calculate a standard error. So if your standard error is coming very high, so that means your data is spurious, so that cannot give any generalizable results. So these are all the issues of statistics that you have to come across while analyzing your data. Okay.
Okay.
So you can go for snowball, you can go for convenience sampling, you can go to different organizations, and from those organizations, people in the higher income groups, you can just approach them. So there can be various ways through which you can collect data for this particular study. But practicality of using stratified or simple random, of course you can use, but stratified random sampling technique, using that seems to be quite challenging. I'm not saying it cannot be used, but it will be quite challenging.
Okay.
Okay. So with this, I will end today's session. I'm pretty sure you could just get it with the responses that you have given in the practice session. Although we couldn't ask to more number of people, but still with the information that we have shared with all of you and the examples that I have given, I think you have got it and you'll be able to use it in your discussion. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
giving
much,
this
ma'am.
opportunity and interacting with you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Enhance our knowledge in the subject area of sampling techniques. It's in a very easier way. And it was really informative for us, ma'am. Thank you so much being here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Now,
Thank
now,
you.
thank you, ma'am. Now let's
Thank you,
proceed.
ma'am.
Now let's proceed to next lecture after 5 minutes break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a 5 minutes break. Hello.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, noted.
Okay.
Hello class, can you hear me?
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Once again, very warm welcome, Dr. Jigyasa Bisariya, ma'am. She will going to take the session on data analysis and report writing.
I'd like to finish my previous class before I start the data analysis part.
Okay, ma'am.
Yesterday's class, and then I will continue with the this descriptive stats and how does I'll connect the dots with the research methodology to statistics.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
So in the today's two sessions, I will be majorly covering all the research designs. I'll be switching off my video for the sake of bandwidth. And how to conceptualize a research, how to initiate any research, and what is the general way of starting any research problem. Or for those of you who are interested to pursue PhD after this course, what could be the pathway for you, right? And that is something that I will take you through. That is the first objective of that was the objective of the module that was given to me. So well, first cover that learning objective. After that, in the last 45 minutes, I will cover the statistics part. However, I really am apprehensive. I'll need another session if there is some representative from EPCO. To cover up for the statistical inference part.
Which part of man? Sorry, I didn't recognize.
I'm saying that I will need one more session of 45 minutes to cover up for statistical inference.
Ji, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. You will take the session, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
So I'll just restart from where I had left yesterday. So just a quick recap of what we learned yesterday. So we studied what is the research process. We studied that research process is it's all you need to conceptualize the whole problem. Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
We studied that the process initiates with an idea that there is something that sparks interest, some research question. And then when you start building on a research, you actually see what the background work has already been done. So that in research, we have this very strong thing that we avoid repetition. We tend to not to do what the previous researchers have already done. So the very meaning of the word research is to add to the existing body of knowledge and not to repeat the same body of knowledge, right? So when you are pursuing research, that means you want to add to the existing body of knowledge and contribute with newer knowledge in any subject area of interest. So then we studied that the whole process begins with has the following steps. We actually review the literature of what has been already done, and then we find out the research gaps. That means we know that these are the questions which are still unanswered, or a specific question is answered but in some other context, or maybe with a change in the ecological conditions or environmental conditions. Any specific problem may lead to a different kind of a research, and that kind of gives us an idea of what could be our question of interest that we intend to research on. And that question gives us so many hypotheses. That means the hypothesis is nothing but sub-questions under the main question. And then we create a blueprint of how we're going to pursue that particular research. So then in the next last class, collecting data, analyzing data, and interpreting data is a different module altogether. And it's something like how you collect information, how you analyze it, how you report the result is one particular module in the research methodology. And from here, from the last class, I was at the blueprint of the research, and that is the design of the research, right? So the design of the research is nothing but a procedural plan. So we covered this part. We studied that if we want to study any phenomena at one time stamp, we call it a cross-sectional study. But if you see the context of environment management, if you see the context of various sustainable development goals, and for those since of all of you are doing this, pursuing this post-graduation in environment and development management, So like, environment management. So for you, the main, everything centers around all the sustainable development goals, right? So like, something or the other, we are trying to like, meet those goals, which are directly or indirectly affecting the environment and humankind in general. So like, sort of all these sustainability concerns sort of, create an interdisciplinary science wherein, you need statistics, you need the way to pursue research, and you need to like, know about the environmental conditions. You need to know a bit of social science as well. And the interlinkages that you study, and, that formulates your goal or the basis for mapping or identifying how you can meet any specific target which is related to sustainable development goals. So like, if you see from the ecology, environment, or social science perspective, there are various interventions or programs which are going on to attain those goals. There are interventions which are related to reducing climate vulnerabilities. There are interventions which are related to public health, right? There are interventions which are related to like, eradication of malaria, eradications of poverty, and so many other like, concerns, but they require know-how of integrated disciplines. So like, if you're talking of malaria eradication, you might as well have to loop in doctors and the public health system, right? So like, so these program interventions, if you are trying to examine program interventions, you want to examine, what was the before scenario and what is the after scenario of after any specific intervention. So if you see from our Ministry of Environment and Forest perspective, they do all these activities under CAMPA, the compensatory afforestation. So for them, it is very important that what was the state of the land before they did any afforestation, and what is the state of the land after they did any afforestation. So they tend to identify the barren areas or the land that is common, belongs to the commons in any vicinity of interest, and then they put up this afforestation activities. And after this, so all the studies of the impact of the CAMPA are like, based on this before and after study. So before and after study design actually is a pre-post testing research design. It is suitable wherein you are trying to measure a situation or a phenomena or an issue or an intervention, and then you try to assess the scenario before and after any particular intervention. How many of you have seen Google Time Lapse?
Sorry, ma'am, can you repeat what you said?
How many of you have seen Google Time Lapse? None of you. Okay. I'll just explain longitudinal study design and then maybe demonstrate that particular tool. So, like, there are plenty of softwares that, if you see land use of any specific area, you could be aware of something called land use, land cover analysis. How many of you are aware of that? So if you see town planners and, all these city planners, what do? They try to assess the land use of any particular city, like, before any particular intervention, right? So as the city development plan, they are trying to make, if they want to see what is the urban sprawl of Bhopal. So they will take one image of Bhopal in, like, in maybe 1999, right? And then they will take the same image, satellite imagery of Bhopal in the year 2021. And then in the previous year's image, they will try to build a marker saying that this much body is the urban development, this much body is the water body, right? This much area is delineated for the roads, this much area for the urban establishment, right? And then in the 2022, they again download the same satellite imagery, and then they see like, the changes. They see the dynamics in terms of like, what was the before scenario and what is the after scenario. So all these land use, land cover classification also come under the category of before and after study design. So another example I can give is like, we are trying to assess the yield of the farmers before the climate smart interventions done by EPCO and after the climate smart interventions done by EPCO. So that is also an example of a before and after study design. Any doubts in the study design?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Great. So then we move ahead to one more kind of a study design, and that is called my longitudinal study design. So these are the examples that I've already given. So like, there was this study that was commissioned in Harvard, a long time back, back in the times of your World War II. And then, they examined that they had a sample of some 545 or something participants. And the research question at hand was more based on human psychology, that what are the drivers of happiness for any, like, mankind, what are the ways in which, one can perceive oneself to be a very happy person, right? So then the idea was that, we need to track this person over a period of ages, as the person ages, when the person is, the study started from the, had subjects which were in their teenagers, and then, how their life moved on, and, how they changes. So there were all kinds of samples with all kinds of ethnic backgrounds. So since in the US, there is a wide variety of ethnicity of people, it has people from all parts of the world. So they created a sample which had all people from all parts of the world. And then they, were tracking these people over a long period of time and tried to, like, draw some conclusion. So years over years, the, one PI died, then another PI joined, and, the study continued with lakhs and lakhs of funding, right? And in dollars terms, if you calculate it in Indian rupee currency terms, it would be, lakhs of rupees wasted on the study, right? Wasted on the study. Why I'm saying is, like, what they inferred out of years of inference was, the driver of happiness is your relationship, right? It's not money, it's not your position, it's not your facial beauty or physical parameters. It's your relationships that determine how happy you would be in your life, right? So, but then the Indians knew it all through, right? So they didn't actually discover something which was a completely new discovery, right? So, but then the example of, this is just an example of a longitudinal study design, wherein you have a set of participants and you examine them over a long period of time. So this is one example in psychology. So another example of longitudinal study design is your climate data, right? So if you see your climatic parameters, they have been tracked. They were like, IMD had stations back in 1901, right? So from 1901 onwards, you'll have, less number of stations, but a lot of meteorological data. And then with years over years, if you see IMD's data set, it grew in number of stations as well, and the granularity as well. Daily time series available for precipitation, daily temperature record available, like that, right? So, like, if any phenomena is studied over a long period of time, we call the study design to be a longitudinal study design. So now I want to show you something very interesting, and which is also an example of a Google Time Lapse. This example is also an example of a longitudinal study design. So what did Google do is, it took satellite imagery of various places for a very, very long period of time. So ever since the satellite imagery was available, they created this huge repository of images. And then they applied some image analysis techniques and created this tool called the Google Time Lapse. So if you'll just Google Time Lapse, you'll be able to see. This is like, it's an program built into the Google Earth engine. So like, the Google Earth engine is a very rich platform of lots and lots of data sets. So like, if you see India, so like, if you can see, like, maybe, just take this example of mining in Canada, or you take this example. So it's just like, I say, move it a little slowly. I say, move it like this.
Ma'am, I'm not able to see the screen, that screen.
Okay. So if you see, this is the same place. I'm seeing Germany and how this Germany is changing with time. See, 96, 99, 2003, 2004, 2005, and here we are at 2018, 19 or 20. So if I pause it here saying this is the image of 2020. But if you see, this is a longitudinal data. Year over year, you are able to track how this place was and how the construction happened. Are you able to see?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's quite interesting to see, this another, if you see how, China developed ports, see the way year, how does the year change and how the entire land use changes. It's a beautiful tool, and if you see this is yet another example. This Aral Sea, how it dried over years. So right from the imagery of your, from Berlin, you're moving to the Aral Sea in Kazakhstan. So this was the sea in 1984, and now how it is year over year, how it dried off. So 84, this was the sea. 2005, this is the status. 2015, this is the status. 2020, it's only some patches left over here. It's completely dry. Right? So, the longitudinal study design is such kind of a research wherein we try to, track any phenomena over a long period of time. So here, Google Time Lapse is a tool wherein they have done land use, land cover analysis over a long period of time and build it into the form of a spatial analysis tool and made it available to the world to see how certain places are changing with time, right? So in social science, there are longitudinal studies. In we have one paper in using this particular study design. You can download this paper, which is the impact evaluation of government microfinance scheme. It was a part of the consultancy that we did for the state rural livelihood mission. And we tracked the loan records of rural women who were beneficiaries of the self-help group scheme. And we tried to correlate the dots with the DFID's framework for poverty eradication. So that was also utilizing this kind of a study design. I have few more papers into longitudinal study design, which is an analysis of long-term climatology. So all of you, since all of you are studying this ecosystem and environment, you would be aware of something called climate models. Are you aware of something called climate models? Downscale climate models. Okay, all of you see this, huh? All of you must have seen this news, na, that we are warming at a rate of 1 degrees. We need to do something to reduce this warming of 1 degrees, right?
Right, ma'am. Yes, we sure.
Pardon, I could not hear you.
Yes, ma'am. We saw this news.
So based on the past data, there is one study design which is called the retrospective study design, wherein we do what? We try to study any phenomena over a long period of time in the history. So if you see all these archaeological studies, they are based on the retrospective study design. That means we want to retrospect what would have happened in the past. So in previous years, when this climate change concept came into your existence, the subject came into existence, it was debated that maybe in the increase of the CO2 is a natural process, right? So it's not driven by humans. But then there were so many retrospective studies into Paleolithic studies. That means they tried to examine fossils and samples of the itself, but it is farly, driven by the human intervention of, putting so much CO2 into the atmosphere, right? And that's how all these NDCs and all these conference of parties and, people, collecting together and building up all these NDCs and, putting up all these targets in terms of decarbonization, putting up targets in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other things. So what kind of a study design is like, you retrospect what has happened in the past, and then you combine it what is likely to happen in the future. So like if you see the whole world of climate modeling, it is based on preparing a mathematical model of the future based on what has happened in the past, right? So prospective study design talks of what will be the future scenario depending on what has happened in the past. So like, the retrospective and prospective analysis is more or less, driven by what has happened in the past and what is likely to be to happen in the future. How many of you have read a book or a book named Homo Deus? Any one of you? This is a very interesting book on the evolution of mankind, how the gene evolved and how, how certain phenomena of the human behavior are explained, right? And how the evolution of the mankind happened, right? And if the way the technology is moving, what is going to be the likely, characteristics of traits of the humankind in the future, right? So when you see all these movies which are related to space technology, the people will like to travel space. People would like to for those of you who have seen the whole parts of the earth would like to explore the world of space. So all these futuristic business plans, futuristic thought process of how the business is going to work, how the scenario will be 10 years down the line, right? What would be the major concerns of the society 10 years after, or maybe in the next generation of our children's generation. So those kind of projections or studies which are related to what is likely to happen in the future, depending on what has happened in the past, is called a prospective analysis. And based on what has happened in long ago, is called a retrospective analysis. So can you appreciate these study designs? The cross-sectional study design, before-after study design, longitudinal design, retrospective and prospective design. Any doubts in this concept?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
So now there are specific kinds of studies which are called the cohort studies. So cohort studies is like, if you see medical science, people who are doctors who work on certain kinds of diseases. So like, if a doctor is working on a set of Alzheimer patients for a long period of time, right? So then we say that the person is doing a cohort analysis. That means he is trying to examine only one kind of a population. So his study is pretty confined to only one kind of subjects. All these subjects, but all having one specific characteristic, right? So that is called a cohort analysis. Examples of cohort analysis in social sciences, like when you are trying to put up a study on immigrants, if you try to put up a study on people who have been displaced by war, right? So those kind of studies are called the cohort studies. So like, you try to put up a variety of participants, you study a variety of participants, but all with one single characteristic, right? So those are called cohort studies or cohort study design, right? Another kind of study design are called case studies. You try to examine specific cases. So like I'll give you an example of a case study, right? So when we went to put up this study on the impact of the state rural livelihood mission. So state rural livelihood mission, we could gather that the loan books will give us a lot of insights into how these loans work, or what is the status of the loans, and how do the whole functioning of the self-help group happens. right? So that kind of idea we had, and we collected a lot of longitudinal data to introspect and analyze how the loans have been taken by various people, and on what grounds have they taken the loans on, or what have they done with the loans, etc., etc. But then we needed to showcase that what exactly the program can do if it is implemented in the best of the possible ways, and if it is reaches out to that kind of a target audience who is able to uh, to leverage the best of the benefits of the intervention, right? So when we try to look for certain such cases, we actually talk to the MORD people, the Ministry of Rural Development people, that we would like to interact with some people who have exceptionally benefited from the program, right? So then they introduced to us to some people called the bank DDs, right? So we went to Rajgarh and we met some of these bank DDs, some of the girls who were moderately literate, 7th or 8th standard pass, and then they were trained with the help of the State Rural Livelihood Mission project, right? So they were provided training to do bookkeeping. They were provided training to do set up accounts, and they were taught how to create a bank account of the entire group, or manage the bank account, how to manage the loans, how to do the calculations and other things, right? So they were taught under that. So we met few ladies who not only advanced their education after taking this training, and whatever their weak points were, like in terms of mathematics, in terms of calculations, they got covered up with the help of the project interventions or the trainings that they got from the MORD personnel. And then we met certain success cases of women who were trained till the pursued their higher education and had the degrees of till the level of masters in social science, masters in social work, MSW. And then we met certain women who are who are from sort of very, very poor households, but after the interventions, training, being a part of this particular linkage program, they were now they are working after their masters. They are working with private banks like ICICI Bank. The self-help groups have bank accounts which they manage, and we could see this very empowered ladies who are riding a scooty, holding a laptop in their hands, going to the villages and helping the women who are literally illiterate to create bank accounts, have maintained their own cash books, maintain a record of how much they have lended or how much they have borrowed or how much they have returned, in terms of how much is the interest they would incur and the things like that. So that example, and then what we documented in those cases is called a case study. So you'll find all these NGOs, the non-government organizations who work on field, on the ground, they document, for them the research mainly covers up case studies, wherein their NGO has put up some intervention and people have benefited exceptionally out of their interventions. So since not all people will be benefiting equally, but there would be some people who would try to leverage the benefit the most, right? And then such case studies are created, right? So if you see all these entrepreneurs, right, they also become subjects for case studies. That how did they conceive a business idea, right? And later on, how did their business grew into multi-millions? And if their business grew, what were the drivers of their success and other things? So such kind of a study, which is largely based on a lot of literature, a lot of sort of qualitative analysis. That means you're talking to these people constantly and trying to analyze and document whatever be their experiences, is called a case study design. Got it? So all these case studies also published by the publishing homes. Case studies are also published by newspapers, right? There are certain portals which showcase the entrepreneurs with exceptional success. So that kind of a study design is called a case study design. So if you see, if you're from the medical stats domain, if you're a doctor, they also put up a lot of research. So if you see, there is this entire world of research which is called the clinical research trial, right? any new drug comes into the market, before that it goes into testing, right? So if you remember all this, in the COVID times, there was this new vaccine that was created. And then people were like, they were to volunteer for the vaccine, right? You remember all those stories around the COVID?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So in medicine, there are certain set of studies which are called the blind and the double blind studies. Right. So in blind studies, what they do is like, there are like, let's suppose in a ward, there are 15 patients, right? So in the 15 patients, they examine the level of criticality of any disease among the patients. And there are some patients who are given the drugs or the medicine, and there are some who are placed on playbook. That means they are just like, क्या कहते हैं इसको, glucose के bottles चढ़ाते हैं instead of like, the actual medicine. So then they know that their condition is not very critical. So they then try to put up this study on, यदि सिर्फ एक psychology होती है ना कि मैंने दवाई खाई है, उससे कितना better लगने लगता है, right? So that is called a playbook, okay, wherein you are not given the actual medicine, you are simply on multivitamins and other things, and just by the psychosis of like, being on medication makes you feel better, right? So like, then they try to effect, attribute the difference that has been brought into the health of any person by the admission of actual medicine, right? So like, actual medicine, if the person's blood pressure changes from this to this, ABC from value maybe 110 to 140 or 140 to maybe 110. I don't know, maybe I'm speaking the wrong numbers. So from number A to number B, it had changed, right? Or just by like, being on playbook, that means just eating multivitamin pills, your BP has suddenly, reached that level wherein you can call it normal. So like, then you say that like, unless the person is extremely serious, if the person is serious, they will not put up this study onto this particular person. Any person who is not seriously ill is given this medicine, that even if your psychological treatment, if you're getting better, why take the medicine, right? So those kind of studies are called blind and double blind studies. Blind studies means the person doesn't know whether I'm taking the medicine or I'm taking the playbook, right? And double blind studies means the researcher who goes and collects this experimental data or monitors the blood pressure or monitors the hemoglobin related parameters or whatever, ABC, whatever be the study of the interest, right? The researcher also doesn't know which subject is there, right? So like, that bias of knowing a person or knowing the patient is not there, right? And they are able to attribute the change that has been just brought by the feeling of getting better and the change brought by the actual admission of the medicine. Got me? So you're aware of now all the study designs, possible study designs? So we have missed one large part of a study design, which is called an experimental study design. I'm coming back to the qualitative and quantitative way of grouping studies. But if you see most of the research in medicine, in biology, in animal sciences, in veterinary sciences, in even in climate sciences, even in physics, studies which are related to mechanics, robotics, artificial intelligence, they are all experimental study designs. That means you need experimental equipment to gather information. You set up the experiment and conduct the experiment and then draw your necessary conclusion. So whatever be your hypothesis, you need some experimental work to support your theory, right? And if you're putting up such a theory, what is it that you need to do? You need to come up, for any experiment to become a universal law, it should have two main characteristics. One, your hypothesis should be falsifiable, number one. And number two, your experiment should be repeatable, right? So there was this research done by an institute in Japan, wherein, do you guys want a break?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Please continue.
You guys are okay. Actually, Aarti sent me this schedule of 12 to 12:45. So I just thought maybe
Okay,
if you guys don't want to break, I'll continue.
How long you need? How long it will continue, ma'am?
Okay.
Continue, ma'am. Continue.
Okay, great. So, like, there is this, for any experimental research to be successful, it has to be a repeatable experiment. That means, like, there's this research institute in Japan, then they, like, came up with an experiment and they could demonstrate some success of a stem cell therapy. They said that, the stem cell therapy, revives certain things, is able to cure cancers and, of certain sorts and other things. So they, like, set up all these experimental, there was a full-fledged experimental setup and other things. And then they published their work and, it got, wide recognition for their turnkey research. And eventually, like, when they published, they also communicated the research to Nature, right? And Nature also accepted their claims of their experiment being a success, right? But then, like, when your work is published in Nature or something and it's a turnkey research, then it's very likely that your lab is going to be surrounded by press and media and so many other things, right? You'll get wide acceptance, and since this was, like, sort of a claim for the cure of critical diseases and other things, so it was also the center stage of like, of people say, introspection and people's, like, scrutiny. So when scrutinized, they, like, they say that since you're talking of this experiment, so this experiment need to be repeatable. Please repeat this experiment and showcase your success. So the Japanese lab tried their level best to, like, showcase the success. But unfortunately, when they tried to replicate the study, they actually could not meet up to these expectations. Ultimately, what it led to was, like, the paper was, like, revoked back from the journal. The PI and the co-PIs who were involved in the process were feeling like, like, unlike India or in other worlds or in other parts of the world, in Japan, failure is not an acceptable norm, right? So, like, it could lead, it actually led to massive outlash, and, people lost their reputation, and, some people lost their jobs in terms of, staking the reputation of the lab with such a thing. But then the researcher till the end made those claims that though this experiment is not repeatable, but we communicated the results only when we were successful, right? And then this huge uproar in the scientific community with respect to that, right? So, like, this, if you see this testing of vaccines, if you see all kinds of other experimental research, they test it on multiple subjects. There are multiple replicates of the same experiment. Same experimented is repeated many number of times and tested for replication of the same kind of results before any communication with respect to the success of the experiment is communicated anywhere in the scientific communities. So imagine, like, the Japanese lab, people are so meticulous, and it's obvious that people who reach to that particular level must have had a lot of integrity in terms of academics and integrity in terms of their rigor for their experimentation. But many times it just fails, right? So it's just science, pure science. You have there are certain facts you have explanation for, certain facts you have absolutely no explanation for, but just they happen, right? So a lot of things in nature completely unexplained, right? But they happen. So if you see another way of looking at research, it is largely qualitative research and quantitative research. So I, like, gave you an example of a longitudinal study design, right? So longitudinal study design you need numbers, you need some quants to, like, to make claims. So when, all these researchers into climate change, they make claims saying this particular, like, across the Narmada basin, the number of rainy days has reduced, right? There is heavy downpour only few days, right? The July rainfall has suffered a lot, right? There is the huge, rainfall. The total rainfall remains the same. That happens over year, but the whole downpouring is happening only in a few days. As a result is what? Flash floods, right? A lot of people, a lot of water is lost into downpouring in just one single day, right? While if the precipitation is regular and is distributed over a longer number of days, the retention or the surface water retention is better, right? So that's how, like, the quantitative research works. So if you're talking of any longitudinal study design, or even before after study design, or for that matter, cross-sectional study design, you need to translate your research in terms of some numbers, right? The numbers have to give a story, right? So for making any tall claims, or even short claims, or making any possible claim for that matter in research, you need some quants or some numbers that support your hypothesis or support your story, right? Story in terms of what kind of a communication you want to intend to make with your research. So for any cross-sectional study design, so like I'll give you an example of this study commissioned to an organization named ACER. There they were commissioned this study of a cross-sectional study design, saying that these are the 10 locations, and on these 10 locations you make an assessment of people's livelihood, health, and maternity health, and even food and nutrition, and status of sanitation, right? So then they designed this questionnaire named Paheli. If you just Google Paheli questionnaire ACER, you will be able to see this questionnaire, which is a sort of a visual data collection tool, right? And then they try to assess people's livelihood, what people do, right? So cross-sectional study, but across a cross-section. That means the study was in Rajasthan, was to happen in Rajasthan, UP, Bihar, all the North Indian states, and some parts of Kerala and Andhra, right? So again, everything that was there in terms of the social context of people's situation of livelihood, sanitation, water availability, and the status of health and nutrition was quantified in some numbers. So for research to be quantitative in nature, you will actually be representing it with some numbers. So there will be bar charts, pie charts, and so many visual representations available with the data. So first you will be quantifying your social science or any other problem in the numeric terms. And once you get in the numbers, or whatever be your the research problem translated into a data problem, then you put up the data analysis plan in terms of how you look at those numbers, how do you infer from those numbers, or what kind of story you generate out of those numbers, right? So the numbers speak the story, and that is an example of a quantitative research design, right? So one good example of a quantitative research design is think of the COVID numbers that are getting reported on a daily basis. In the first wave, in the second wave, in the third wave, right? So they're all quantitative research in terms of whatever number of samples collected versus number of positives found. Then they calculated the positivity rate, that these many samples we are collecting, this much is the ratio of the number of people that we are getting COVID positive, right? So if the disease is having a very high prevalence, all the randomly selected samples would have a higher positivity rate. That means the more samples I test, the more people I'm finding COVID positive, right? So that is the way the quantitative research works. That means all the problem, whether it be a problem of bioinformatics, biology, medicine, social science, pharmacy, any other discipline, right? Climate, ecology, environment, anywhere, your research problem or your hypothesis has to be encoded into a data problem. And the research has to be quantitative in numbers, in terms of you need to quantify what is going to happen, right? So you take out averages, you take out predictions. So one of our researchers is working on a topic named trying to connect the dots between whether forest cover helps precipitation, regulates precipitation, or whether precipitation, forest cover together regulate the water yield, right? So this is the question at hand. So the ecological problem is whether having forests would help in supporting getting good water yield, or would ensure the rivers flow properly. Water yield is there in the rivers, right? So for that, the whole ecological problem has to get translated into a data problem. So the data problem is I need statistics which are related to the forest cover. I need to calculate the water yield on ground from places which are forested and from places which are not forested, right? I need to calculate not only the water samples, but I need to assess the climatology of those places. Like, what has been the climatic parameters of the last 40, 45 years, and how the overall climate is behaving in certain kind of a land use. So if there is certain kind of land use, what is the climatology? If there is a different kind of land use, what is the climatology? So, like, the problem of ecology, environment, but translated in the quantitative terms, in terms of numbers. So your problem becomes a data problem, and then comes in picture the statistical analysis, the tools and techniques in statistics. Then you try to run correlation analysis, you try to build a regression model, you try to do some kind of quantification for some kind of a cause and effect analysis. When you try to assess ये होगा तो ये होगा, right? और ये यदि ऐसा है तो ये ऐसे behave करता है. So if this number is this is the behavior of the other number, right? So that's how the quantitative research helps in causation or attribution of any particular cause to any particular effect, or attribution of any effect to any particular cause, right? So, like, so quantitative research widely used in social sciences. So, like, if you see the Ministry of Planning and Statistics, it widely uses something called the Standard of Living Index to assess, how the people live, right? If you see the Ministry of Planning and Statistics, it also has, all these index numbers and all these economic indicators by which they calculate the DA of the government employees. They calculate, the set of amount of inflation that exists in the market, and everything that is general economics gets translated into a data problem. And the data when analyzed gives the numbers, right? So another example of quantitative research, share market. How many of you invest in the shares or keep a watch on the indices, NSE, BSE?
Ma'am, sometimes, but we are looking for that figures for balance sheet of the industries and how the share prices are get risen. So we have that understanding how they do the quantitative research.
Yeah. So there's this whole stream of analysis for the behavior of the stock market. So people who do it professionally, these are people who sit in the this in the NSE, BSE in Mumbai, जो ये आपके stock exchange के अंदर बैठते हैं, they specialize in a techniques of analysis called technical analysis. So technical analysis of share is a completely different stream of research. It requires a different kind of statistical analysis tools and a different set of time series analysis techniques, know-how of those techniques. So technical analysis and financial engineering is yet another stream. So if you see advent of that research, so it is like, the machine learning and this artificial intelligence is also entering into this particular world. And in this era, there are scientists who are data scientists who are working on deriving,
Sorry to intervene, ma'am, but as
now side.
Yes.
Hello. Sorry to intervene, ma'am, but as at present era in data science, there are multiple easy modeling of the data. Very easy to collect the data and segregate the data as per the requirement. So it is very easy when we introduce the technology especially in quantitative research.
So it is there. So if you see the world of machine learning, it is trying to get into automating many things. So that's what I was saying. AI machine learning is automating even share trading.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
So you have artificial intelligence based, robots who will trade your shares. You need not actually, sit and keep a watch on the market yourself.
I will let you know. For other profiles, I've got few with you. Just talk to them for mechanical.
Any doubts? Any doubts in this? There is yet another kind of research. So if if you the case studies or the cohort studies, they fall under the category qualitative research. So the kind of examples that I gave of the case study research and others, they fall under the category of qualitative research. So even if you see share market as a phenomenon, there is one way of looking at numbers is the quantitative way. There is technical analysis, there is machine learning, and there is so many things that drive the value of the shares. But then there is always speculation, the politics, the political scenario, and so many external factors that can be contributed or that could be attributed to qualitative research. So when you say these older people who are trade shares and all that, they acquire this trait of both kinds of research. The quantitative research is something that quantifies in terms of how much a share value would rise, right? But the qualitative research is how is market going to behave if Russia puts up a war on Ukraine, right? So if the political scenario is this, what will be the uncertainty? If the countries in the Middle East fall under the category of or are literally at war, how is going to affect the crude prices, right? So that is something that is not built into the mathematical model. There are no dummy variables that talk of those things. But yes, the know-how of the people who are putting their efforts into this trading world, they have the out of their instinct and know-how of the political scenarios and uncertainties and other things, they supplement this information and drive the decisions of whether to buy or to sell shares. So in social science context, qualitative research is documenting case studies and and many other ways. So the data is what has happened, why has happened, how it has happened. So if you see, give an example, if I see my example of my project of monitoring and evaluation of the climate smart village program. So here I am calculating the data related to the quantitative data related to the yield of the farmers, right? People who have sown the drought resistant seeds that were given to them, and their impact in terms of how much is their yield security ensured with this with the new kind of seeds. But then if I need to answer what seeds did better, why they did better, etc., then I also need to do some qualitative research. That means go to the field, talk to the farmers on how if a certain yield dropped, why did it drop. So that will give me fillers for the answers of why a specific thing has happened. So if there is a crop loss, how and what were the factors. So they would tell me there was less rainfall in certain months, the monsoon was not better, right? There was a shift in the sowing time, etc. So all the whys you can get by combining quantitative and qualitative research. So in the real world research, you basically combine both these. Combine quantitative class. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
This concept? So moving to the process of scientific research. Now, a few of you decide that we need to pursue research as a career, right? So how do we do it? Right, the process of research is we ask a question or gather information about any particular phenomenon. And on the basis of that, we tend to formulate an hypothesis, a tentative description of what is it that you want to study in your research, test the hypothesis, or maybe just do some kind of gather some kind of evidence with the existing literature, draw some kind of conclusions, and see how, like, you know, the observations and the theory that you're proposing, you know, how do they sync with each other, right? So reproducibility of the published experiments is the foundation of the science. So when you say science, it means that you're putting up an experiment that is going to be repeatable and which is going to work even if I do it in some other context, in some other place, right? So scientific method is you must have an hypothesis which is testable and is also falsifiable, right? So today you come and say, I will put up a research topic on research study on the directions from which the sun rises and the direction in which the sun sets, right? So essentially, are you studying any hypothesis? No, you are just trying to reestablish the already known facts, right? So then for you to pursue any research, your hypothesis should not only be testable, but it should also be falsifiable in terms of, like, you know, you can make a claim saying that a particular thing works in improving the yield, right? You maybe, you know, did some kind of an experimentation of a seed and designed a new genetically modified seed, and, you know, and on the basis of your experimental study, you claim that it is completely climate resistant, right? So, like, you know, if you put up this experiment and test it, your claim as well could be falsifiable, right? So it might work in one season, it might not work in the next cycle, right? So that's how, like, you know, the scientific method or your research question should be. It should not only be testable, but it should also be falsifiable, right? And that's how there are two ways of putting up research. So falsifiability is a criteria. So one way of looking at problem is general statement to a specific instance. So, like, you know, general statement would be a genetically modified seed is like, you know, is the need of the hour for, like, you know, for ensuring nutrition in the seeds, right? So, like, you will put up with so many experiments, you will consolidate so many experiments and then come to the conclusion, right? Or inductive reasoning. That means I have certain series of cases, example 1, example 2, example 3, and all that. And when I am able to, like, you know, deduce so many examples which exhibit the similar phenomena, then I make the claim saying that, you know, out of so many experiments, we infer that this is the rule or this is the law, right? So there is two ways of research. One is the bottom-up approach and the top-down approach, right? So it comes from specific cases to general cases is inductive reasoning, and from general statement to specific cases is deductive reasoning. So this is how you can start any like, you know, any research with a specific objective, and these are the basic characteristics, and this is how you can put up a research design, right? So any doubts in this particular concept? If no doubts, then I move ahead to descriptive stance. Anything that you would like to discuss in the topics covered so far? Any observations, any queries, any doubts? Do let me know before I start the new topic. No doubts?
No
Yes?
doubt.
No doubt, ma'am. No doubt.
Okay, okay. So then I will start with the new topic. So when we, you know, ended it there on the qualitative and quantitative research, we actually need to now know that how these quants work. You know, if I need to, like, you know, maybe I have formulated a hypothesis, I have collected data with respect to certain specific. Now, how is it that I am going to infer from it, right? How do I draw conclusion, right? So if you see statistics, It is nothing but a set of tools which will help you collect, present, analyze, and interpret data. So you can also, some people also call it art of maths, right? And what does it help you to do? It helps you to enable or view a situation in the quantitative terms. And all the real world questions, you tend to derive answers with the help of numbers, and that is called statistics, right? So, where do you see statistics, having substantial importance? If you see all the sustainable development goals, the significance of statistics is widely acceptable, widely used, or widely penetrated across all disciplines. You need data to run business, you need data to run government, you need data to answer questions in ecology, environment, livelihood, etc., etc. So if you see, where will I get all this data which is related to any relevance of any phenomena? Are you aware of freely available data sets?
Yes, ma'am.
If you go to this data.gov.in, or if you go to this portal called the World Bank data sets, there are plenty of data sets which are freely available for download and analysis. So since I am from the data science background, and it all began with statistics, so if I classify the data by the source, then from where am I getting this data? So if I classify it by source, I can say that the data is at two kinds, that is primary data and secondary data, right? So primary data is something that I collect from the field, go to the field and collect the data, or set up a field experimental unit and collect the data. So if I'm from the hydrology background, I will set up an experiment to measure water yield and put up so many experiments for doing various hydrological related studies, right? If I'm a climate scientist, I will be putting up monitors in terms of measuring all the parameters of the air quality, etc., etc. If I'm climate scientist of IMD, I will be putting up and monitoring the weather on an hourly, monthly, or whatever basis. And I'll have so many, more than 150, 200 parameters to measure and monitor. If I tend to classify data in terms of qualitative and quantitative terms, so qualitative data could be a categorical data, that means a category, whether a gender is a male or a female, an income is between 10,000 or 20,000, 20,000 to 30,000, etc., etc. What is the name of a place? What is the name of the district? So essentially in qualitative data, I really cannot do much of a mathematical calculations. But in quantitative data, I can do everything. I can not only calculate the averages, but I'm also, would be interested in calculating the deviation of data, and then I will apply various statistical techniques to correlate data, to build a relationship between them, etc., etc. So if you see categorization by the type of data, so by type of data, it will be nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio scale, right? And then if you just classify by types of data, this was the older norm before data science. The data is either nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio scale. But if you see from the world of data science, data is spatial, data is temporal. Even the tweets that you do are data. The image of the earth that you gather or capture from the satellite imagery is also a data, right? So can you give me an example of a text data? How many of you use Facebook?
Ma'am?
Yes.
Text data maybe BJP and support. So how many times that words are being used in number of tweets in a day?
Yes. So there is
Yeah,
this,
that can.
this thing that is that is concerning the text analysis, right? So there is this word in data science. In data science, we call it as tweet sentiment analysis. So this graph that you are able to see now, this is a spatial image of the of India overnight. So you can see the span of the electricity, right? And the United Nations uses such spatial maps to see map electricity or map poverty overnight. So if you see, they take this image of places like Uganda and others and predict, how poor a particular place would be, where there would be less light, right? If you see text data, so there is this kind of a map is generated for the entire world to map the tweets. So you can see the geographical locations of tweets. You'll be able to know that all these tweets are happening wherein people use public transport, right? So from one location to the other location, you will be seeing a large, huge frequency of tweets during the periods of commutes. That means the time when people sit in local train in Mumbai, right? Suddenly the frequency of the tweets from specific locations in Mumbai would be on a very, very high peak, right? And there's this word in data science, which is tweet sentiment analysis. So all the text that you do on Facebook, all the posts that you do on Facebook, whether you like some post, you share some post, etc., becomes an analysis tool. There are specific machine learning methods that analyze the sentiment, right? There is this whole big project put up by Google, wherein they have, and the project was called Google Ngram, wherein what they did was they consolidated all the books of the from the past, right? So then they took up the and then they encoded the sentiment of the book in terms of whether the whole sentiment of the book was of any specific chapter was sad or was it happy or something like that, right? And then they inferred that if you see by the books published, we can say that we have become a happier world, right? So in the post-globalization era, the kind of books that were written were different from what kind of books were written in the pre-globalization era. So that could those were was books written in English, but the regional context or the local languages, that's a limitation that they're still working on. But they digitize 1 million such books, and then they track their sentiment over a long period of time. And then they said that the world was a very sad place during the World War and the middle era, or the era of the baby boomers. And then world became a happier world, or more books on motivation, more positive thoughts, more literature available in terms of positive thoughts and positive thinking, or positive or healthier or happier sentiments in the post-World War II or post-globalization era, right? So even the tweets that you do, the text that you type, something, the images that you post on Facebook, they also constitute what? Text data. And they are used extensively by marketeers to promote their products to you. So if you're using Facebook, if you're using a mobile phone with a GIS, you're using location intelligence, all these companies know everything about you, where you go, what mode of travel you use, right? And you're becoming a part of an increasingly collected world, right? And this data is a great opportunity, because spatial data is running businesses like Ola. Geographical data like OpenStreetMap is giving the way for making the way for the driverless cars, right? So if you see technology, in times to come, there will be so many automated systems which will be working on this. So this spatial data also feeds into IoT based systems. So if you see, there's this experiment in New Zealand which says the streets are not littered by the night, right? But there are sensors all across the pathway. So if there is any movement on any road, the sensor senses that, and wherever the movement happens, the street lights open. And these street lights are powered by the solar panels, right? So this is how people are transitioning to a more, you can say, sustainable planet by conserving energy sources, by conserving perishable sources of energy and things like that. So plenty of projects which are based on based on the very fact that the data is not merely nominal, ordinal, ratio scaled, or interval scaled, right? Text is data, your anything, geographical information is data, and all kinds of data, if consolidated and looked into perspective, can pave the way for achievement of your SDGs, right? So if you see from the other perspective of the data, right? So just a temporal data. So the kind of example that you saw with the Google time lapse is nothing but a temporal data. So, but then if you are just a beginner, how will you start looking at data and numbers, and how will you start look at analysis as a discipline? So if you want to initiate your, sort of open a window to the world of analytics, it all begins with the know-how of central tendency. So all the world's data, like you're a class of 33, right? We are not having a physical class. If we were having a physical class, for me, knowing you all would be knowing your qualifications, knowing your the places you belong, right? Your mean, median, height, right? Age, weight, time or tenure in your careers, the kind of learning outcomes that you intend to achieve with this particular course, right? So simple things like your height and weight, are measured with the help of central tendencies. So all the data in the world, two metrics give all the information. One, what is the central value, and how dispersed is the data. That means how much the data varies, what is the lowest value, what is the highest value, what is the mid values. So central tendencies are the mid values, right? And what is the spread of the data in terms of dispersion. So if you know the maximum, minimum, range, deviation, and the values of the central tendency for any data under study, you actually essentially know the entire data. With n, of course, the number of observations on which you are drawing any data or calculating anything, right? So can you just guess, why do we need 3 measures of central tendency? Why not 1?
Ma'am, in that case, if we consider only one, in that case, there will be a huge variance in our data.
Yes. So since the very formula of arithmetic mean discounts the very fact that the data might have extreme values, that's why we need different measures of central tendency. So our arithmetic mean is nothing but I just divide the whole, add up all the numbers divided by n, that is the total number of values, right? So if like let's say suppose there are 2 to 3 extreme values in my data, the whole arithmetic mean shifts by that particular value. So otherwise, to get rid of that particular bias, what do? We simply arrange our data in either increasing order or decreasing order. And whatever be the value in the center, we take it as the median, right? So, and then there are situations when you need the mode, right? So how many of you feel that when you go to shopping, sorry, you feel that maximum variety is available in certain numbers of clothing or in certain numbers of shoes? So mode is the value of the highest frequency. So the most frequent, shoe size will have the maximum variety in the store, right? And that's why you need mode. So you see all these advertisement of all these colleges who make claims about your salary, pay packages and payouts. So these days there is this trend of colleges claiming their median salary at placement and not the mean salary. Why they don't do it? Because if one student gets a package of, let's say suppose 40 lakhs per annum, and another student gets a package of 4 lakhs per annum, what does arithmetic mean do? It averages both. So the real behavior of data is completely shadowed because of the arithmetic mean. And it is highly governed by the extreme values. So the student who joins the institutes comes with the expectation saying, average salary यहाँ पे मतलब 25-26 लाख के आसपास रही है. So like, I should also get that much of salary. But the truth of the story is very different. It's only one candidate who got 40 lakhs. The rest of them were pretty much at 17 to 18 lakhs, right? But the mean value is extremely, biased or changed or, affected by extreme values. And that's why measure as it's not the only way in which we can measure central tendency. So for places wherein the spread of the data is also important, and not only the arithmetic mean, there are certain contexts in which we use the median as the right matrix instead of the arithmetic mean, right? And there are situations where the value of the highest frequency is of higher importance, and that's where we use the mode, right? So the three measures of central tendencies are the mean, median, mode, and the measure of spread or the know-how of how far your data goes is the range, the interquartile or decile range, the standard deviation, the variance, and the quartiles. Got me? Do I have more time? It's already 1:30.
Hello.
Do I have more time?
Yes, ma'am. You can take the next session also, ma'am.
Okay. So. Okay. Okay. So should I give a 10 minutes break or continue?
Ma'am, should I ask the students, participants? Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Ma'am, you can continue the session, ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
I'll continue for half an hour more and cover up this particular part.
Yes, ma'am.
So these are the ways in which we actually, look at data. We look at the central tendency and we look at the spread. So if you see this particular diagram, it is called a box and whiskers plot, which is sort of a way to represent your data in your minimum value, your maximum value, your median value, the number of observations in the first quartile, number of observations by the third quartile, and this is the standard deviation. That means how much. So there are formulas, differ for mean and median for grouped and ungrouped data, right? So instead of taking this mean, median, mode and for group data, I would like to take a small example and do this exercise using Microsoft Excel, right? So I'll just instead of covering these formula over here, which you are not going to type definitely, or not do any manual calculations as of now, I would rather give an example of calculating descriptive stats using Microsoft Excel. So in the slides, we have the formula by which we are able to calculate the deciles and the measures of the dispersion. But I would rather prefer to give an example of of an Excel-based tool by which you can calculate all these metrics and understand descriptive stats. Right. So I'm just sharing my screen with an Excel sheet. Is there any way in which I can, in Zoom, I can, when I teach in this Google Meet, I can directly, share an Excel sheet or something uploaded here in the classroom. So is there a way in which I can share this Excel sheet with you people?
Yes, ma'am. You may try to share your screen, ma'am.
I'll do that. I also want to email this to your group, the Excel sheet, so that you can also try your hands on it.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Okay.
So if you have any group email ID, just share it so that I can mail it.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sending it to you on WhatsApp.
Okay.
हाँ मैं खाया यार
Okay, I'm emailing this Excel sheet to you guys.
Pardon, please.
Yeah.
आपने भी
हेलो
हेलो मैम, आप मुझे ना व्हाट्सएप कर दीजिए अगर पॉसिबल है तो।
हाँ, मैं आप मुझे ईमेल मिल गया है आपका, उस पे मैं ईमेल कर दे रही हूँ, है ना? I'm emailing the Excel sheet. So once you guys get a feel of this Excel sheet, it will become very easy for you to Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll try to connect with me. I'm just emailing it to you, okay? epco.institute@gmail.com. No? You will get an email from me from jigyasa@ifm.bhopal.edu.in.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Right, so I'm just emailing.
Ji, ma'am. Okay.
The mail has no content, just the Excel sheet.
हाँ. जी, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello.
So this is a data set of a superstore. A superstore which has plenty of branches in the US, right? And you have values which are related to sales, the kind of product that you are able to sell. It's a real data, and it is a very commonly used data into the data science circles. So we teach business dashboard making and doing all kinds of statistical analysis with this sample data set. So I've just shared it with you. So you'll get a first feel of analytics with this data set, and you'll be able to relate it with so many YouTube videos which are based on this data set. With this data, I would like to show you examples of various data types, right? So if you see, this is a real world data of a store. So it has details like the region, right? It has, for every order, it has a shipping date, it has a customer, it has a customer name, it has a segment, it has a region, it has category, it has the quantity of sales, right? This is the sales, right? So what all data types are we able to see here? We have both quantitative and qualitative data over here. So the name of the state is something. Can I do any mean median mode on state? No, but I can do a frequency analysis. I can calculate how many observations for each state. So if I just do a filter operation over here and select this, so I'll just be able to see how many distinct values are in this particular field. So this is what is an example? This is an example of a qualitative data. Do I do this postal code is a number, but do I do any calculations on them? No. So for me, this is also a qualitative data, right? Or a categorical data. So if you see, categorical and numerical are the two categories of data. So for any qualitative description, I have categorical data. So all this is categorical data, right? And all this is numerical data. So if you see the sales data or the quantity of this particular recording in progress, discount or the profit, this constitutes what? This constitutes quantitative data. So if I want to make any conclusion out of this data, all the mean median mode calculation will be done on only these numbers. Are you able to see my Excel sheet?
Yes.
So if I just have to calculate what is the mean sale of this particular store, what will I do? So there are somewhere around how many observations? 9,994 observations for the total sales, right? So if I need to calculate the mean median mode, I'll be able to calculate only the mean median mode for the numeric values, right? So how do I do that in Excel? I'll simply write it in the form of a formula. Or you can come here and you're able to see this particular box over here. If you're able to see this box, are you able to see my screen? Screen wherein I'm trying to move my mouse on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. We are able to.
Some next. So if I just need to add the sale volume, analysis is I should be able to add the numbers I should be able to calculate the averages, and I should be able to calculate the spread of my data. So if I see, if I try to add up this number, again, I'll go to the auto sum button and I'll press the sum. So the beauty about Excel is I can simply drag this formula from here to this entire row with the help of the black handle, and it copies the formula by changing the resolution or the name of the row in which I have applied the formula. So formula here was sum of R2 to R995. If I copied the formula in the column S, it became sum of S2 to S995. When I copied the formula to T, it became sum of T2 to T995. And similarly, U2 to U995 has been copied over here with the help of the fill drag. So here I am able to see the sum of the numbers. So in Excel, I can, calculate this, give it a kind of a formatting so that it looks different from my rest of the data. And now not only the sales, but also the average values or the data central tendency is important for me. So again, over here, you will be able to see other things like average, like count of the numbers, like maximum, like minimum of this particular cell. So within the auto sum box, you will be largely be able to calculate all the things that pertain to this particular number. So once I say average, see, it has added the column of the sum as well. So I just pull my mouse up and say, I need to calculate the average of R2 to R995 because that is the only number of rows for my original data understanding. So here the average value of the column R is this. And I simply drag this formula over here. And I'm able to see the average of all possible values. Now, if I want to know the count of the observation, again, I come over here. So for those of you who are comfortable, you can simply, type equal to and look for the relevant formula. Like I can type the formula count over here. Count how many observations? So I say that count R2 to R995. So there are 994 observations. Why? The first observation is for the name of the row. You got this? Can you calculate the average, sum, and count of numeric data? And similarly, I have formula for variance, that is standard deviation. So I can simply type variance, or I can calculate STD. So see, here we have standard deviation and standard deviation A and standard deviation PA. There are various formula. All you need to do is to use the function standard deviation A. From R2 onwards till R995, I want you to calculate the standard deviation. So here I am able to know that the central tendency of this number that I am studying, which I'm not able to see because the data is quite huge. So I can come here, choose this column, go to view and freeze the top row. So though there are 9,000 observations in this, my first column will remain freezed as I scroll down the Excel sheet. So here I am able to compute that the total sales across all stores of this superstore is this much. Total quantity sold is these many goods, right? 37,873 goods sold on a discount value of 1561, right? And the total net profit made was 286,397, right? So this was the net profit made, right? This was the average value of the sum of the sales, average quantity, average of each of the values. These are the total number of rows or the total number of orders. And this is the standard deviation. So when I say, how good is my sales? So I'll say that my total sales is this much. My mean sales is 229 with a standard deviation of 623.
दीदी आप आ जाइए मैं तेरे को नहीं कह रही मैं बात कर रही हूँ आपस में
वही मैं बोल रही हूँ
अपन
कि
किसी को
पहले ही बताते हैं मगर मेरे घर की खिचड़ी तो आप देख ही रहे हो ना
फिर तो कैंसिल करो
There seems to be quite a commotion in the class. It would be interesting to see the recording. So this is how you can calculate the mean, median, and mode, and the spread of the data with the help of Excel, right? And I think you can use this recording to, see how these calculations were done by me, and then you can repeat this experiment. And once you learn this, then it will be noteworthy to understand the statistical inference method, which I think for which we need to schedule a separate class. So class, would you like to practice this concept first? So will you be able to calculate this mean, median, mode, and standard deviation on your own?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then I'll end the class today here. And then, just for those of you who are not getting a hand on it, may practice all these formula and function. We will use the same Excel sheet to understand statistical inference in the next class. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
I hope all of you got the Excel sheet.
Yes, ma'am.
So just practice this part of calculating the central tendency of the data. And in next class, I will teach you how to do a complete descriptive stats with QNES, kurtosis, and standard deviation and various other metrics. Okay, class. So we'll meet again.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
It was a very informative session. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
today's session is end, no?
Yeah. You please practice this, because unless all of you are on the same page, no?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can continue, my pressing my buttons on Excel. But if all of you are not, have reached that particular level, you'll not be able to follow next what I'm doing.
Okay, okay.
So just have a hand on it, practice it, and in the next class, I'll teach you statistical inference with it.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.